Chapter 168. Dean looked at the worm. If I was the murderer, I believe that I wouldn't be stupid enough to assassinate a deacon of the magistrate with a steel nail. Such an obvious sign. I think that someone who knows the inside story has ulterior motives to frame me. After all, it's rare to kill someone with a steel nail. The old man and the middle-aged man looked at each other. They naturally knew that the inside story referred to Dean's prison escape, although the nobles had come forward to suppress the matter. But they knew that Dean had indeed escaped from prison and the evidence was conclusive. However, since the matter was covered up, they were not willing to go deep into it. The main purpose of this investigation was to find the murderer who assassinated Deacon Huey. From the current blood test, it seemed that it wasn't Dean's doing. "Don't talk nonsense," the middle-aged man shouted. "Be honest. Did you use this nail to kill other people before you assassinated Deacon Huey?" Dean smiled. "I'm really wronged. Although I have a grudge with Deacon Huey, but I won't do such a crazy thing. I've just been bailed out. I don't want to provoke any trouble." The middle-aged man carefully stared at him. After a moment, he exchanged glances with the old man. The old man waved his hand. "Test the blood of others." The middle-aged man nodded slightly and immediately collected the blood of other people according to the previous method. It will take 12 hours for the homologous insects to be willing to eat different kinds of blood after eating. You will temporarily put them in prison and wait for the results to come out before leaving. The middle-aged man indifferently said. The four people looked at each other. The youth couldn't help but say, "How can this be? I'm just a suspect. How can you restrict my freedom?" "Don't be long-winded," the middle-aged man shouted. The youth's face changed. He gritted his teeth, but didn't say anything. Dean looked at the old man. "I have been verified. Can I go now?" The old man looked at him and meaningfully said, "Remember your current bail status. If there are new results, please cooperate with us. Otherwise, you will be arrested as a fugitive." Dudian nodded. "Of course, I also hope that you can catch the murderer as soon as possible. I also want to see whether it is a coincidence or someone is trying to frame me." The old man nodded slightly and said to the middle-aged man beside him, "This case doesn't seem to be the work of an ordinary person. Later, apply to the headquarters to send punishers over to investigate." The middle-aged man's expression turned serious as he nodded and said, "I understand." The other four were brought to a special interrogation room. The old man said to the middle-aged man, "Go and investigate the recent deaths. See if the blood on the bodies of the deceased is the same as the blood on the nails." The middle-aged man's eyes lit up, and he immediately agreed. Dean had to hire a carriage to return to Yardtown as there was no knight of the magistrate to escort him. Barton and others were surprised to see Dean return safely. They came forward and asked questions. Dean told the three of them to feel relieved. Then he sat in the carriage and went to the Rhine Castle. This time, it was an open and above-board visit. He entered through the main gate, and after being notified by the guard at the gate, he entered the Rhine Castle. Old Feline was sitting in the hall. There was a trace of surprise in his eyes as he saw Dean being led by the guards. But his face was full of smiles as he came forward. "Welcome. What a rare guest. It has been many years since a hunter has come to visit our Rhine Castle. Please sit down." There was a young man and a girl in the hall. They were wearing brightly colored clothes. They should be the grandchildren of Old Feline. Both of them were happy as they heard Dean's words. They knew what it meant to be a hunter. It meant a lot of wealth and money. "Hello, my name is Houghton." The youth came forward and shook hands with Dean. Dean shook hands with him and smiled. "You are welcome. I'm here to talk about cooperation with old Patriarch Feline." "Cooperation?" Houghton was surprised as he heard the word. Although the Ryan family belonged to the Melon Consortium, but there were many nobles under the Melon Consortium. The commission was distributed according to the proportion of shares. Every time the resources were brought back from outside the giant wall, the Holy Church would get a fixed commission. The rest would be taken by the Mel family and the Bourron family. The remaining small part would be distributed to the small families like the Mel family and the Bourron family. In the entire Melon Consortium, the Ryan family belonged to the bottom few. Therefore, the money allocated to them was almost negligible. Unless the consortium's hunters had a big harvest outside the giant wall, they wouldn't be able to make a profit. However, if it was a hunter who worked for their family, then the resources from outside the giant wall would belong to the hunter and the holy church. The rest would belong to the hunter's family. Although a single hunter couldn't support a noble, but for the Ryan family, it could improve the living conditions of the family a lot. Over the years, they could slowly accumulate wealth. Mr. Hunter, you were so young. The girl next to him looked at Dean in surprise. Hutun quickly shouted, "Don't talk nonsense." The girl stuck out her tongue and shrank back behind him. Old Feline faintly smiled and said to Dean, "Mr. Dean, please come with me." He beckoned the middle-aged maid to support him. He used crutches to lead the way. Dean followed him upstairs to his study room. Old Feline ordered the middle-aged maid to withdraw and close the door after entering the room. There were only 2 people left in the room. Dean and Old Feline's smile slightly disappeared. Old Feline sat in his chair. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Dudien. "I was surprised that you were able to come back safely after being taken by magistrate for investigation." Dean faintly smiled as he pulled a chair and sat down. "They couldn't find any evidence, so naturally they let me go." Old Feline narrowed his eyes. "Isn't the nail used to kill Huey the evidence? Didn't the magistrate find anything from it?" Dean looked at him with interest. "Do you mean the blood on the nail, or the smell?" Old Feline's eyes moved. "What do you mean?" Dudien smiled. "Do you also think that I used steel nails to assassinate Huey for revenge?" Old Feline was startled. "Isn't it?" Dean smiled. "Let's not talk about it today. I'll come to you when I need your help. I'm here to talk about cooperation with you." "Oh." Old Feline's eyes slightly opened. "What cooperation?" Chapter 169. Create a new consortium? Old Feline shook his head. "It's useless. Although our Ryan family is qualified to apply for the establishment of a consortium, but no one will be willing to join." Dudien said, "No, we don't need others to join for the time being. Only nobles and wealthy businessmen can apply for a consortium. The procedures for commoners and wealthy businessmen to apply are too cumbersome. Nobles are different. They only need to show their identity. After establishing a consortium, they can rent a separate passage outside the giant wall from the Holy Church. They can clean up their own area. This is what I told you before. It's a thank you gift." Old Feline smiled. "Although I don't know where you heard about these things, but the amount of money needed to rent a passage to the outside of the giant wall is unimaginable. Even the Mel family and the Burong family need to form a partnership. Moreover, they need to attract other aristocrats and wealthy businessmen to join the consortium. Our small Ryan family is simply impossible to do so. I've said it before. Anything that can be solved with money isn't a problem." Dudien smiled. "You should apply for the consortium first. I'll give you some money in a few days." "You?" Old Feline was surprised. He looked at Dudien suspiciously. "Are you going to rob them?" Dudien smiled. "The money in this world depends on robbing." Old Feline stared at him for a moment. "I hope you don't make too much noise. Our Ryan family is just a small boat. It can't withstand your tossing. Whether the boat will capsize or not depends on the operator's operation, not the size of the boat." Dudien smiled. "Has the Burong family looked for you in the past few days?" Old Feline nodded. "Not long ago. It's all thanks to you that my face was drenched with saliva. Then it's to moisturize the skin. It's easy to say. As you wish, the Melon Consortium has decided to kick our Ryan family out of the consortium. They have a good relationship, so the Mel Consortium will certainly agree. I believe that we will be kicked out in a few days." Old Feline sighed. Dean said, "That's good." Old Patriarch Riley smiled. "I'm just sad about the money. If we are kicked out, they will definitely find a way to do things in the dark. They will make our Ryan family lose all the resources we invested." Dudien shrugged. "Not much anyway." Old Feline's mouth slightly twitched as he saw Old Feline's indifferent appearance. "Now you and I are tied to the same boat. I hope we can cooperate happily." Dean looked at the sky and got up. "I should go back." Old Patriarch sighed. He suddenly thought of something. "What is the name of the consortium? Ryan Consortium?" Dean thought for a moment. "Let's call it New World Consortium." "New World Consortium," Old Feline murmured. Dudian left the Ryan castle and returned to the hotel in the town under the old patriarch's personal escort. The middle-aged hotel owner was vigilant when he saw Dudian. There was a hint of worry and alertness on his face. Apparently, he remembered Dudian's appearance when the knights came to look for him in the morning. "It's done." Dean went back to the room and said to Barton and the other two, "In the next days, you will live in the Ryan castle. Tell them that you are my friends, and they will entertain you." Live in the aristocratic castle? Barton and the other two were stunned. Dean smiled. "I hope you can learn wisdom in life. You will have a hard time in the future. Although the wind and rain in front of us have been covered up, but once exposed, we will be beyond redemption. Moreover, we will face more problems in the near future. You are our right-hand men. I hope you can be strong." Barton and the other two looked at each other. The joy in their hearts suddenly faded. Dean didn't conceal the assassination of Huey from them. They also knew what kind of amazing move Dean had made. Although they had expected that the future would be very rough when they followed Dean, but they didn't expect that they would fall into such a dangerous situation at the beginning. Although the past days were hard, but they were relatively comfortable. But now they could be destroyed at any time. "I know." Barton gently nodded. Joseph and Crone bowed their heads in silence. They felt the cold wind around them. Dean was satisfied as he saw that the three of them were aware of the sense of crisis. A wolf could be trained in a dangerous environment, but a dog could be trained in a comfortable environment. Dudian returned to the residential area alone after entrusting Barton and the other two to the Ryan family. These days he entrusted the Ryan family to inquire about the whereabouts of Jura and her husband. They were expelled from the house assigned to him by the consortium and repatriated to the residential area after he was imprisoned. Fortunately, the house in the residential area hadn't been sold yet. Otherwise, they would be homeless after being repatriated. Dean's heart was full of guilt as he sat in the carriage back to Lynn Street. He hurried to get off the carriage. He saw that the original house of Jura and her husband had been cleaned up. There were no fallen leaves on the grass. It was still early, so he could smell the smell of Jura and Gray in the house. However, Jura's smell was stronger than Gray's. She should be at home. In addition to Jura's smell, Dean also smelled a strange smell that was mixed with Jura's. He couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Seeing that there was no one around, he immediately jumped over the guardrail and arrived in front of a window next to the house. Through the gap of the window, he suddenly saw the scene in the room. It was still the same as before. Jura was sitting in front of a desk, wearing glasses and reviewing information. Next to her was a 7 or 8-year-old boy. He wrapped his wrist around her arm and gently rubbed against it. But he was very obedient and didn't make a sound. Jura smiled as she stopped from time to time to stroke the little boy's head. Dean was slightly startled and suddenly felt a little sour in his heart. He was silent for a moment, slowly turned around, stepped on the lawn, climbed over the guardrail, and left the street. Dean stopped after walking for a long time. He looked up and saw the hidden alchemist's stronghold in front of him. 3 years had passed, but the alley was still as dirty and dark as before. The walls were still camouflaged with cloth. However, Dean could smell that there was no smell in the alchemist's stronghold. Most likely the stronghold had been moved. At this moment, a carriage passed by. The breeze blew the curtain of the carriage, and a faint fragrance floated out. Chapter 170. Is it her? Dean's eyes flashed as he recalled the smell from the carriage. After a moment, he moved towards the direction of the smell. An hour later, Dean followed the traces left by the smell and came to a nearby town. The streets here were relatively dirty. Some dark alleys along the way were filled with rats. There were few people in the shops on both sides of the street. Dean stopped in front of a huge manor on the edge of the town. He saw the carriage that had passed behind him was parked in the corner of the manor. Nearby the carriage, there were 7 or 8 other carriages. Judging from the shape, they were not professional carriages used on the street, but privately built vehicles. The fabric and the size of the structure were different. Dean stood in the corner and looked at the manor. He soon noticed that the lawn of the manor was extremely clean. There were 4 guards at the door. Behind the other walls of the manor, there was a fixed smell floating back and forth along a fixed route. It should be the patrolling guards of the manor. Dean carefully looked at it and thought, sure enough, it is her. He walked around the town and soon found a tailor's shop. He went inside and said to the boss, make me a robe. I want it now. The boss was a curly-haired woman. When she saw a guest come in, she warmly greeted him and said, please sit down. The robe is very convenient. It will be ready soon. Duddy nodded. He looked around the shop and suddenly smelled a faint, fishy smell. He looked at the direction of the smell. It came from a wall behind the tailor's shop. It was extremely hidden. He could not help but be startled. He looked at the curly-haired woman unconsciously. The curly-haired woman turned around and asked, what color do you want? Dean's eyes slightly moved. Black. Linen will do. Good. The curly-haired woman turned around and picked out a piece of black cloth. She took out a pair of scissors to cut it. In this era, mechanical energy had not yet been used. Naturally, the sewing machine had not been invented. Dean silently looked at the back of the curly-haired woman. Suddenly, he found that the color of her nails was light red, and there was some residue in the gap. With his eyesight, although they were separated by a few meters, he could clearly see that these residue were minced meat. Is it a murderer? Or an alchemist of the Life faction? Dean was shocked. He didn't expect to encounter such a thing in a tailor's shop in this small town. Thinking of the many carriages parked in front of the manor, he faintly felt that he had entered an incredible alchemy stronghold. After a moment, the curly-haired woman handed the black robe to Dean. Please put it on and see if it fits. Dean didn't wear it but looked at it. Not bad. After paying, he picked up the black robe and left. As for the mask, although the shop sold it, he gave up on buying it. Otherwise, it would be too weird to wear a black robe and a mask. If the other party was also an alchemist, they would probably guess his identity and leave information about his face. Dean went to other shops in the town and bought ink, pins, plush dolls, masks, flowers, and other things. He came to a small hotel and threw the plush doll to the side. He dipped the pen in ink and drew an alchemy tattoo on his chest. After a moment, the previous black cross tattoo was branded on his chest again. He asked the boss for some coal in the room and dried the ink on his chest. Then he crushed the flowers and smeared the juice on his chest. He pulled off the remaining petals and threw them into the inner layer of his underwear. Finally, he left the hotel with a black robe and mask. Back to the manor, Dean took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to him and put on the black robe and the white cat mask he bought. Then he walked towards the manor. Who are you? For guards noticed Dean and stopped him when he came close. Dean said, get out of the way. When the 4 guards heard the unyielding voice behind the white cat mask, they looked at each other. One of the guards retracted the coldness on his face and said in a low voice, do you have an invitation? Dean frowned and thought for a moment. I didn't bring it. You didn't bring it? The 4 guards were surprised, and their faces turned cold. Please leave. This is private property. No one is allowed to enter without an invitation. Dean replied, I'm looking for a friend. I'll have to trouble you to notify her. She just came over. Her name is Nightingale. She brought an invitation card with her. She can prove my identity. The 4 guards looked at each other. One of them shook his head. No, we are not responsible for passing messages. Dean's voice was cold. Don't fail to appreciate favors. You won't be able to bear the responsibility if today's event is delayed. The guard frowned and sneered. Don't talk nonsense. It's just a private gathering of my master's friends. It's not a big deal. If you are long-winded, we can only use tough means to ask you to leave. Dean didn't think that the guard would be so difficult to deal with. He could only say, really? How many stars does your master have? Even a mere guard is so important? His words were filled with anger, as if he had blurted it out in a fit of rage. The 4 guards' faces changed. The first guard carefully looked at Duddy and, did you say that you're looking for Nightingale? I'll go in and help you ask if there is such a person. If there isn't, then don't blame us for being impolite. Dean snorted. Tell her that she's an old friend from 3 years ago. Hound is looking for her. Hound? Hearing this nickname, the 4 guards looked at Dean's face slightly relaxed. The guard immediately turned and ran into the manor. 10 minutes later, the guard returned. His attitude became polite. Please wait a moment. I'll help you inform her. She will be ready soon. Dean stood quietly with his hands clasped behind his back. After a moment, the gate of the manor was opened. A tall figure wearing an owl mask came out. She was wearing a bright dress. It seemed that she was going to a common mass party. After a moment, Nightingale came to the door. She looked at the figure wearing a white cat mask. There was some doubt in her heart. Are you Hound? Dean heard the beautiful voice. Although there were some changes compared to 3 years ago, it was more clean and mature, but it was still the same familiar timbre. He knew that his nose was not mistaken. He immediately said, Mouse, Viper, Nightingale, Hound. He successively said 4 code names. Nightingale was slightly startled. She pondered for a moment and said, Can you let me see your tattoo? Dean nodded slightly. The guard next to him opened the door. Dean lifted his black robe to reveal the black cross tattoo on his chest. Nightingale heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile, I didn't expect it to be you. How did you find me? The 4 guards were relieved as they saw that Dean's identity was confirmed. Dean said, I've been wandering in this town recently. I accidentally saw you today. Nightingale's owl mask revealed a pair of bright eyes. She looked at Dean. Unintentionally? I haven't seen you for 3 years. It's not easy to explain how you can recognize me. Dean's mind raced as he heard her teasing tone. He scratched his head. Well, in fact, I heard it from a friend, but I'm not sure if it's the same person. I took the risk to come here today and found out that it's really you. Nightingale was interested. Friend? Which friend? Tell me, and I may know him. Dean smiled. My friend doesn't want others to know his name. He's afraid of causing trouble, so I hope you can forgive him. Chapter 171. Dean nodded slightly and followed her. Is this a new alchemy nest? Almost. Nightingale answered vaguely. She suddenly thought of something and asked, I almost forgot to ask. Are you an apprentice alchemist, or have you joined the Dark Church and become an official alchemist? Dean quickly thought about her words and truthfully said, I'm still a trainee. Nightingale let out an oh and suddenly changed the topic. Speaking of which, we haven't seen each other for nearly 4 years. You suddenly left and completely lost contact with me. Did you encounter any trouble? Dean nodded slightly. A little trouble, but it's over now. Nightingale smiled. It's okay. Do you have your own alchemy point now? Dean's eyes lit up. I have one. What's wrong? It's nothing. If you have time, I can take you to see the rats. Their gathering place is in this town, not far from here. If you have the need in the future, you can study with them, Nightingale said with a smile. Dean's heart moved. The mice aren't with you? Nightingale slightly shook her head. At this time, the 2 came to the door along the lawn. The guard at the door recognized Nightingale and opened the door for them. Come with me. There are many big people here. Try to keep quiet. Nightingale whispered. She led the way after entering the door. The hall was dimly lit, and the walls were not lit by oil lamps, but by diamond-shaped crystals. It was said that this was a crystallized body of a special kind of monster, and this kind of monster was also the main target of hunters, so it was extremely valuable. The furnishings in the hall were moved to the side so that they could return at any time. There were 4 attendants standing under a huge oil painting in the main hall. One of them saw Nightingale coming over and looked at Dean. One of the attendants asked, Who is he? My assistant. Nightingale said. The attendant looked at Dean but didn't say anything. He turned around and pushed the wall next to him. There was a slight rumbling sound. The wall under the oil painting slowly split open and revealed a dark passage. Nightingale went in first. When it was Dean's turn, the attendant suddenly reached out and stopped him. We need to eliminate your smell. Please close your eyes. Dean looked at Nightingale and slowly closed his eyes. He felt a fine powder falling from his body. The powder had a strong, earthy smell, and it covered up his smell. Go in, the attendant said. Dean opened his eyes and saw Nightingale waiting in front of him. He immediately followed her. After he entered, the passageway slowly closed and returned to the appearance of a wall. The surrounding light was dim, but Dean could see very clearly. He followed Nightingale along the curved passage. Soon, the light was much brighter. They came to a huge square surrounded by high rock walls. The dome was also made of soil, but it was embedded with shining crystals. There was a striking building in front of the square. It was as majestic as the magistrate, but it had a bit more gloomy atmosphere. "That's a branch of the Dark Church," Nightingale whispered. Dean couldn't help but look at it. He was shocked. He didn't expect that there was another world under the seemingly ordinary manner of a rich businessman. Such a huge underground structure was an extremely huge project beyond his imagination. "Nightingale." At this time, a clear and bright voice echoed. Nightingale and Dean turned their heads and saw two figures coming from the square. One was a man and the other was a woman. The man was wearing a golden robe and a dog mask. The woman was wearing a dark red robe and a rose mask. Her eyes and cheeks were covered, but the lower half of her face and lips were exposed. It was very eye-catching and sexy. "Golden Rose." Nightingale smiled as she saw the two of them. They came closer and looked at Dean. The golden-robed youth with the code, named Golden, laughed. "You brought a new friend? Why don't you introduce him to us?" Nightingale seemed to be a bit embarrassed, but still said, "This is a friend I've known for a long time. His name is Hound." "Hound?" The woman in the rose mask glanced at the golden armor beside her and said, "Golden armor, that's a suitable code name. Speaking of which, what does your friend do? Is he like you? Does he major in metal research?" Nightingale looked at Dean. "I remember that you were studying the stone materials, right?" Dean nodded slightly. "I learn a little bit of everything. I don't have a major direction for the time being." "Learn everything?" The golden armor glanced at him and said, "It's not that I want to talk too much, but you have to major in one area to have a way out. The world of alchemy is vast and profound. If you learn everything, even if you study for 100 years, you might not be able to achieve much." Rose asked, "Have you got a 1-star status?" Dean shook his head. "No, I'm still in the apprentice stage." "Apprentice?" Golden and Rose were surprised. They looked at Nightingale. "Is he an apprentice?" Nightingale looked around and whispered, "Don't be so loud." Golden and Rose looked at each other. Rose couldn't help but say, "How can you bring an apprentice in? Even if he is your friend, you can't break the rules. Only those who have officially joined the church can come here. You should let him leave." Nightingale whispered, "It's okay. I can bring an assistant. It's okay if he comes in as my assistant." Golden smiled slightly. "You are really good. He is just an apprentice. What's the point of bringing him here? It's better to let him wait outside. It's okay since he is here." Nightingale looked at Dean and diverted the topic. "Did you come here today to submit the experimental report?" "Yes." Golden patted his golden robe. They could see the outline of square. He said, "My experiment has made some progress. I hope it will pass the review." "Me too." Rose sighed and said, "I hope the direction of this research is right and I can pass the review. I still need 12 points to get a 1-star medal." The golden armor looked at Nightingale and said, "What about you? Are you here to submit a report too? Speaking of which, your alloy method inspired me a lot. Have you made any new progress this time?" Nightingale nodded. "I have gained something. Then let's go together." Rose immediately said. Nightingale hesitated and looked at Dean. "Would you like to wait for us here?" Chapter 172. Nightingale nodded. "Almost. But even if you don't have a complete alchemy result, as long as you can come up with a reasonable framework of alchemy conjecture, you can get basic alchemy points and alchemy certificate if you can pass the review. After all, apprentices can only learn so much. It is very difficult to find a new direction from all the alchemy theories that have already been opened up. Thus, as long as you can come up with some relatively open-minded or creative conjectures, you might be able to pass the review." Dean nodded slightly. He was afraid that it was not because of the limited knowledge of the apprentice, but because the Dark Church couldn't see the light of day. In the long confrontation, the consumption of the grassroots was far more than that of the Holy Church. The only way to maintain the number and scale of the Dark Church was to relax the requirements of the lower level. In the end, the lower level would always serve the higher level. Rose looked at Dean and said, "Even if you put forward an alchemy conjecture, You need a complete alchemy process and a relatively complete alchemy formula. Otherwise, it can only be regarded as fantasy. Yes. Golden nodded in agreement. Dean thought for a moment and said to Nightingale, I have an alchemy conjecture. I will take this opportunity to apply to the Dark Church. Oh, Nightingale's eyes were a bit surprised. She smiled. It seems that you haven't given up on the pursuit of alchemy in the past few years. I would like to see it. I wish you success. Rose and Golden looked at each other. They wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, they held back and didn't say anything. After all, Nightingale was a friend of Nightingale. It would be rude to continue to question her. Immediately, the four of them went to the Dark Church behind the square. In front of this magnificent hall, there were two stone sculptures. They were very similar to the sculptures outside the Holy Church. There were two four-winged angel sculptures, one male and one female. Both had a handsome face. Their hands were folded in front of their chest, looking up at the sky as if they were praying for all sentient beings. The only difference was that the cheeks of these two angel sculptures were a bit less merciful. Instead, there was a bit more evil charm. Moreover, their wings and clothes were black. They were wrapped in chains and had a bit of a murderous aura. Dean knew from Roseyard's notes that these were the purgatory angels that served the king of destruction. The four of them walked up the stairs, passed by two purgatory angel statues that were over 10 meters tall, and entered the dark hall. The hall was very spacious. There was a huge sign on the left side of the hall. There were many white papers on it. Dean glanced at the white papers and saw that there were various alchemy materials, potion materials, alchemy team recruitment information, and so on. Nightingale stopped and looked back at Dean. You are an apprentice. According to the rules, you can't personally submit your conjecture to the Dark Church. You can only find your master or other official members of the Dark Church to help you. Dean was surprised, but immediately understood. Other alchemists were different from him. Most of them had their own masters. The reason why they stepped on the path of alchemy was that they met their masters and learned some superficial alchemy knowledge under the guidance of their masters. Then please help me to submit it, Dudian said to Nightingale. Nightingale smiled and said, Can you trust me? We are old friends. How can we trust each other? Dean smiled. If it was an average person, then he wouldn't believe it. Taking someone else's alchemy experiment as one's own wasn't something that hadn't happened before. Even many masters and apprentices would have such a problem. After all, a great and successful alchemy experiment would give a terrifying amount of points. Nightingale smiled. All right, leave it to me. She stretched out her hand from the black robe. It was a white and delicate little hand. Dean glanced at it and knew that the owner of the small hand was a pampered person. He rarely did things in person. There was no sign of heavy work done on the palm. Do you have a pen and paper? Dean asked. Nightingale, Gold Armor, and Rose were all stunned. Nightingale withdrew her hand and said in astonishment, Don't tell me you want to write it now? Dean coughed. It's written in my mind. It won't take too long. Really? Although she heard Dean's words, Nightingale still looked at him suspiciously. Who would come to submit an alchemy conjecture without being prepared in advance? Like them, when they came to submit alchemy results, they would repeatedly write, repeatedly revise, and check several times to confirm that there were no typos or omissions. Rose asked suspiciously, Are you really ready? Don't tell me, he said, that because he wanted to see this place for himself? Nightingale looked at Dean for a moment. Can you really write it down? Dean nodded slightly to show his affirmation. All right. Nightingale thought for a moment. We will submit it first. You can write it down on the side. There's a place there. Rose and Gold looked at each other, but didn't say anything. Anyway, they wouldn't be the ones who would lose face. There was no need to offend others. They took Dean to a counter next to the hall. There were many potion materials and alchemy materials behind the counter. There was a door next to it. Every once in a while, someone would come out of the door. The people in front of the queue would enter through the door. Apparently, it was the place where the test would take place. Nightingale, look, there is zirconium behind it. My God, it's so expensive. While waiting in line, they were also looking around. Gold noticed the corner of the counter in front of them and exclaimed in a low voice, Nightingale looked over and sighed. It's really expensive, but my alchemy table is too poor. Even if I buy it, there's no way to melt it. Dean looked over. This zirconium was a rare metal, or it was the size of a fist and silver gray. At the moment, a small piece on the counter was priced at 12 gold coins. 1 gold coin was equivalent to 10,000 copper coins, which was equivalent to the annual income of most residential families. Zirconium metal? Dean's eyes flashed slightly. This thing had a very high corrosion resistance. If it was added to the hunter's armor, it could improve the quality of the armor by several times. It could be used to deal with some monsters that could spit corrosive acid mist. Look! Suddenly, Rose pointed to a tall and handsome figure in the front of the queue. Judging from the figure, it was a young man. Different from the other people's robes, he was wearing clothes, which were exquisitely tailored silver-white clothes with gold embroidery. He was very eye-catching in the crowd. Chapter 173. Forbidden Alchemist's Family? Dean was surprised. He looked at the youth and noticed that there was a badge on the youth's shoulder. It was engraved with a red mushroom pattern. He couldn't help but be surprised. TSK, TSK. Our luck is not bad this time. The people of the Blaze family are indeed extraordinary. They dress differently from us. I heard that there's an extremely powerful force behind the Blaze family to protect them. The golden armor at the side tiptoed to take a look. It covered its mouth with its hand and whispered, "It's really someone from the Blaze family. We can't compare to a family that can research the forbidden technique." Rose's eyes were full of brilliance as she looked at the back of the youth. Nightingale whispered, "I really hope to see the Inferno family's forbidden technique." Dean was curious as he heard their words. What is a forbidden technique? He didn't see these things in Roseyard's alchemy notes. Even a 3-star alchemist couldn't get access to it. Nightingale lowered her voice and explained, "Forbidden technique, as the literal meaning is that it is forbidden to use alchemy. Many great alchemists have been born in history. They have created some incredible alchemy abilities. Legend has it that they can destroy the world. Some can boil lakes, and some can turn the land into a desert. These alchemy techniques are classified as forbidden techniques by the Dark Church because of their great lethality. Research and use are prohibited. Once discovered, the Dark Church will investigate." Dean was startled. Can boil lakes? Is it quicklime and sodium? Turn the land into a desert? He had heard of this alchemist. The Ryan family had once provoked such an alchemist, which led to the family's fiefdom turning into flowing soil and declining ever since. The founder of the Inferno family created a forbidden technique called Inferno. It is said that it will explode when it meets fire. The power is so great that it can even raise a small town to the ground. The golden armor sighed emotionally and said, "Just thinking about such a forbidden technique makes my blood boil. Every time I want to give up, I can't help but persevere when I think about the existence of such a great forbidden technique." "Me too," Rose agreed with a sigh. Nightingale said, "As long as you create a forbidden technique, you will be awarded a lifetime medal. You can even participate in the discussion of the Dark Church. This is something that we can only hope for. Once a forbidden technique is created, it will be forbidden to use it. Nevertheless, the Dark Church will compensate in other ways. For example, the Inferno family created the flame explosion forbidden technique more than 200 years ago. The family is still in existence today. It is said that the headquarters of the family is located in the inner wall." Gold and Rose's eyes flashed as they heard the words inner wall. They were full of longing. Dean thought about the explosion pattern on the metal on the shoulder of the youth. He had some speculations in his heart. "Can I see what the forbidden technique is made of?" Nightingale shook her head and said, "No, the forbidden arts are all sealed in the secrets of the Holy See and are never leaked. Even the members of the forbidden arts family are forbidden to leak them. If they are found to have leaked them, even the creator of the forbidden arts will be severely punished." Dudian nodded and asked, "What if someone else accidentally created the same forbidden technique?" "That's easy." The golden armor, who was beside him, replied, "There have been a few such things in history. The church will first investigate whether the repeated invention of the forbidden technique was a result of plagiarism. If not, they will give the second creator a corresponding amount of alchemy points as encouragement. However, there will be no other rewards or medals. Dean nodded, but didn't say anything. After a while, the queue in front of them gradually came to an end and entered the door. Not long after, they came out again. Although they were wearing masks, from their movements, it could be seen that most of them were dejected and sighing nonstop. Some of them were holding the information they had brought and seemed to be deep in thought. Nightingale, Rose, and Gold couldn't help but look back when the youth of the Inferno family came out. They looked at his back as he left. After a few more people, it was finally Dean's turn. "Go in," a man wearing a white mask indifferently said behind the counter. The four of them entered the door. Behind the door was a dark room. It looked like an old office. There were 3 or 4 desks scattered around the room. Several people wearing the same masks were sorting out the information. A slim figure wearing a devil mask was sitting behind the desk near the door. She was wearing a black silk skirt. Her snow-white arms were exposed. It was incompatible with the ugly devil mask on her face. "Sit down. Who's first?" A pleasant voice came from behind the mask. Nightingale and the other 2 looked at each other. Rose said, "I'll go first." Rose handed out the information under her dark red robe. She respectfully put them in front of the devil mask woman. The devil mask woman opened the stack of information and quietly read it. Nightingale saw the opportunity and pulled Dean. She pointed to an empty table next to her and whispered, "Right over there." Dean felt her breath drifting out from behind the mask. He leaned back slightly and instinctively pulled away a little. He nodded and took the pen and paper from her hand. He went to the table next to him and tested the depth of the writing. When the ink penetrated the tip of the pen, he began to write. Using multiple layers to filter water, this method has already been used. The key lies in the filtering materials, and there is nothing new in your information. Charcoal and cotton have already been used. They are currently the best filtering materials. You haven't found any new ones, and you don't have the ability to synthesize them. I think you should take a look at the last 10 alchemy newspapers. After a while, the woman with the evil ghost mask raised her head and handed the information in her hand to Rose. Her tone was a little cold. Rose froze for a moment before taking her alchemy materials. She lowered her head, seeming somewhat lost. The golden armor patted her shoulder to show encouragement. At the same time, he handed out his own book and said, "This is mine." The malevolent masked woman took it and flipped through it. After a short moment, she shook her head and said, "Extracting plant gum to make a new synthetic material. Although your alchemy formula seems feasible, the formula is wrong. The combustion link isn't detailed enough, and the temperature comparison isn't written down. Moreover, the decomposition process should only be something you thought about in theory, but you didn't put into action. The formula is flawed. In addition, this idea is not creative. Both of your ideas are too rigid. There is no sense of novelty." She threw the information back. The golden armor picked it up and put it back into his robe. Chapter 174. Dudian's mind was completely focused on the memories in his mind. Although he had memorized the basic alchemy symbols, but he had forgotten a lot of alchemy symbols after several years in prison. Most of the remaining ones were vague in his memory. The devil-masked woman saw that Dudian didn't respond, so she said to Nightingale, "What about you? Don't dilly-dally and waste time." Nightingale quickly handed out her alchemy information. The devil-masked woman took the information and quickly read it. Manganese and ferroalloy. The devil-masked woman's eyebrows slightly raised as her eyes swept left and right. She pondered for a bit and nodded. "Not bad. It's reasonable. Passed the preliminary examination." Nightingale's eyes lit up as she was pleasantly surprised. Gold and Rose, who were next to her, said in envy, "Congratulations." The devil-masked woman took the information and said, "Show me your alchemy medal." Nightingale was happy. She took out the oval triangular medal that was hidden in her black robe. The back of the medal was engraved with the word Nightingale. The devil-masked woman looked at the name and said, "The basic alchemy points for the preliminary examination are 10 points. Do you have any problem with this?" "Yes." Nightingale nodded. She was naturally clear about this. "Someone come and enter this into the inventory," the devil-masked woman said to the other people who were sorting out the information. A purple-robed figure came over and took the information and Nightingale's identity. "Hey, are you done? I don't wait for people here." The devil-masked woman looked at Dean, who was writing on the table behind Nightingale. Dean put away the pen and gently blew the ink on the 2 pieces of paper. Then he turned to the side of Nightingale and handed them to the table in front of the masked woman. "Sorry to keep you waiting." The devil-masked woman's eyebrows twitched. "Only 2. She picked up the 2 pieces of paper from the table and glanced from top to bottom. "The ink hasn't dried yet. Did you just write this?" Nightingale, who was standing to the side, hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, he's my assistant, and he's just an apprentice. When he came to apply for admission, he forgot to prepare the alchemy materials, so he wrote it down at the last minute." The devil-masked woman snorted, but didn't say anything. She continued to read the papers. "Yellow and red scales burning? Glass powder?" The woman quickly scanned the first piece of paper and glanced at Dean. She continued to open the second piece of paper. It was still wet with ink, but there were very few alchemy formulas. "Sulfur, wood powder, fire saltpeter?" She slowly swept her gaze downwards and was suddenly startled. Although she was wearing an ugly demon mask, Nightingale, Gold, and Rose still felt her pause. Dean looked at her closely. After a brief silence, the woman slowly looked at Dean. "These are 2 alchemy techniques. Both are related to flames. Do you know anyone from the Inferno family?" Dean's eyes flashed as he shook his head. "I don't know." "Really?" The woman narrowed her eyes as she stared at Dean's mask for a moment. She retracted her gaze and said, "The first alchemy is about the analysis of the basic melting point and ignition point of the material. It is relatively elementary. You can barely qualify as an official alchemist. The second alchemy is more special. We will keep it for the time being. We will give you the results after the confirmation." Dean thought about the words of Nightingale and others. He nodded to show that he understood. "More special?" Nightingale, Gold, and Rose caught the evaluation of the devil-masked woman's words. They were startled and looked at Dean in surprise. Alchemy that could be evaluated as special was either a wrong idea or had a special effect. No matter which one it was, it could be regarded as full marks in terms of creativity. Even if the theory was later speculated to be wrong, it could still inspire some people. So it had no small value. You need to submit your fingerprints, age, and the name that will symbolize you in the future when you join the Dark Church. The woman took out a form from the drawer and looked at Dean. "Everyone's fingerprints are different. We have professionals who can distinguish the difference between everyone's fingerprints. Once registered, this will be your identity in the future. You won't be able to hide or be impersonated by others. I hope you can treat it with caution." "Oh," Dean said. His heart was a little stunned. Previously, he was still thinking about how this world's information was blocked. There was no iris recognition and blood type entry. What if someone killed others and used other people's metals to impersonate them? He did not expect to master fingerprint recognition. Have you thought about your future title? If you haven't thought about it, I can give you some hints such as Black Bat, Knight, Crow, and so on. The woman held the pen as she looked up at Dean. Nightingale looked at Dean. "Hound sound good, but it's too common. Some people have already used it." Dean nodded. He looked at the woman's mask and suddenly thought that he had chosen the identity of an alchemist. It meant that he had fallen into the dark forces. As the Holy Church had said, he would become a devil. Once his identity was exposed, it would be like the darkness meeting the sun. He would be purified immediately. This was a road of no return. But he had chosen it. There was no way out. Even if there was a way out, he didn't want to retreat. A hound is a dog after all. Dean whispered, "Since I'm a devil, why not become a devil among devils? My code name is Devil King." The woman, Nightingale, and others were startled. "Devil King? Has anyone used this code name?" Dean asked. The woman responded, "Boy, your courage is not small. You dare to call yourself a Devil King." Dean indifferently said. Since I don't have the determination to become a devil king, why bother to do these shameful things? Humph. The woman coldly snorted. Listening to your tone, it seems that you look down on your own identity. Aren't you proud of joining the Dark Church? Dean quietly looked at her. Knights are proud of their code. Nobles are proud of their etiquette. Rich businessmen are proud of their wealth. Light is proud of their holiness. And I am proud of myself. Your own identity? You know what's good for you. The devil-masked woman's tone softened as she heard his words. Nightingale, Gold, and Rose were relieved. They were afraid that Dean would say something wrong. They didn't realize that when Dean said myself, he didn't mean the identity of joining the Dark Church, but himself in the real sense. I'll write down your name. I'll investigate it in 3 days to see if there are any people with the same name. If there aren't any, I'll engrave it on your medal. She then asked Dean's age and saved the fingerprints of Dean's 10 fingers. Chapter 175. Go and come back in 3 days. The woman put away the materials and asked the 3 of them to leave. Nightingale looked at Dean as they left the room. Her eyes behind the owl mask flashed. Congratulations! Your first application was approved. Now you're an official alchemist. Congratulations, said the golden armor beside him with a smile. Rose blinked and curiously asked, What kind of alchemy did you submit? How could it be called special? Dean smiled. It's just ordinary alchemy. Rose didn't ask again as she saw that Dean didn't want to say it. Nightingale looked at Dean. Are you free? I'll take you to see Mouse. If he knows that you have become an official alchemist, then he will be able to cure his laziness. Dean thought for a moment and shook his head. No, I have other things to do. Let's go another day. All right. Nightingale nodded. Nightingale and the others didn't leave immediately. They strolled in front of the shops around the square. Occasionally, they would see rare alchemy materials that were hard to find outside. They would buy some. Dean accompanied them to stroll around. He noticed that there were not only alchemists in the Dark Church's branch. There was another extremely evil profession, potion master. If alchemists were equivalent to the scientists of the old era, then potion masters were a group of madmen who were interested in developing various poisons and potions. They were crazier than the alchemists of the Life faction. In the history of the giant wall of Sylvia, potion masters had slaughtered small towns and exterminated aristocrats. Their destructive power was extremely terrifying. Dean had read in Roseyard's notes that it was better to provoke the Holy Church than to offend a potion master. Otherwise, you wouldn't know when you would die. Moreover, the fate of being poisoned by a potion master was extremely painful and miserable. Potion master. If I used the poison to hunt monsters outside the giant wall, then it would be a good weapon. Dean thought in his heart. At this time, he saw Nightingale picking a small piece of nickel in front of the shop. After a while, they were almost done with their stroll and left together. Do you want me to give you a ride? Nightingale asked as she remembered that Dean didn't have a carriage. Dean shook his head. Thanks, but it's not on the way. Nightingale nodded slightly. In fact, she was just being polite. If Dean agreed, she would be in a difficult situation. From childhood to adulthood, she had never been alone with strangers except for her relatives and servants. Gold Armor and Rose also got into their carriages and left. Dean came to a dark corner of the town. After confirming that no one was following him, he took off his mask, put away his black robe, and quietly left the town. In a secret hall that few people knew about, in an office in the main hall, a few figures shrouded in darkness sat at their respective tables, busying themselves. Suddenly, a slight sound came from a metal pipe beside one of the tables. The people sitting at the table turned their heads to look, only to see a pitch-black triangular snake head slowly protruding from the metal pipe. Its forehead was covered with black scales, and one could tell at a glance that it was a venomous species. The figure at the table slowly stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to stroke the snake's head. The black snake slowly opened its mouth, and there was a black reel in its sharp fangs. The figure at the table pulled out the reel, opened it, and took out a letter and a roll of information. After a moment, he put away the information and the letter and muttered to himself, Flame explosion forbidden technique again? It seems that there are a lot of nobles who have been colluding with alchemists recently. He pondered for a moment and immediately wrote a letter, stuffed it into the reel, and handed it to the black snake. The black snake opened its mouth, swallowed the reel, and slowly retracted its body back into the metal pipe. Mount Erdo's Burong family. In the castle, surrounded by rivers of traps, there was a bamboo, chute-like room in the castle. Two figures were sitting in front of a desk. There were a lot of information and several thick books on the table. According to our investigation, the murderer is likely to be his friend. The blonde Gionda sat by the desk and gently tapped a pen on a document. He said gently, "We'll start with him later." A pretty and slim figure was sitting at the opposite side of the table. She was wearing a simple but expensive light green dress. She was looking at the potted plants on the window next to her. When she heard Gionda's words, she looked at the direction he was pointing at. She was silent for a moment and suddenly asked, "Teacher, is there any trouble in our family?" Gionda was taken aback. She looked at the beautiful girl and said, "Why do you think so?" "Recently, my father has been deliberately preventing me from leaving the castle, and even troubled you to come to my house to accompany me. There must be something bad happening outside that my father doesn't want me to know." The girl looked up at him and said, "Can you tell me?" Gionda looked at her bright and clear eyes. His heart skipped a beat. He turned his head away and said, "It's your illusion. Your Burong family is an ancient aristocratic family with a huge industry. How can you encounter trouble? But recently there are alchemists outside. It's not safe, so I'm afraid you will encounter danger." "Really?" The girl stared at him deeply, bowed her head, and didn't say anything. Gionda put away the documents on the table. "That's all for today. I think you're a little tired. I found some clues. I'll go back and send someone to investigate." Then he picked up the books and materials, turned around, and left the room. In this room, which was comparable to an ordinary aristocratic hall, there was only the girl left. She sat silently for a moment and felt a little tired. She got up and went to the window. She looked at the courtyard and fruit trees outside. Her depressed mood eased a lot. Suddenly, she saw a carriage coming from a distant path. There was a bright dark red flag on the carriage. The girl's eyes lit up as she quickly greeted the carriage. The carriage soon stopped in front of the courtyard. A tall girl with white skin and dark red curly hair came down from the carriage. Her slender body seemed to be blown by the wind at any time. She ran out of the carriage and saw the girl in green skirt running out of the courtyard. She was surprised. "Jenny." Jenny's face was full of joy as she said, "Saya, why have you come?" "I'm bored to death, so I came to play with you." Sarah Mel smiled. "Great, let's go inside." Jenny pulled her friend back to her room. The sun was setting. The afternoon passed. Sarah was holding Jenny's favorite plush doll. She stood in front of the window and looked at the sky. "It's getting late. I should go back." Jenny said, "Why don't you rest in my house tonight?" Sarah Mel shook her head and said, "Today I'll go back and rest early. Tomorrow I have a place to go." "Ah, right? I came here to tell you good news." "Good news?" Jenny was surprised. Sarah Mel smiled and said, "You met a hunter who can write poetry. Wasn't he imprisoned? But recently he was released on bail. Tomorrow I will go to a party. Maybe I will meet him." Sarah Mel smiled and said, "That's right. Hunter." Jenny's body shook as she looked at her in disbelief. You were talking about Dean?" Sarah shrugged. "I don't remember his name, but this time he was bailed out. I think he will encounter a lot of trouble. The noble who bailed him out is too weak. He wants to set up a consortium. I think he wants to use your friend." Jenny was stunned and murmured, "Didn't my father say that he can't be bailed out for what he did?" Sarah was surprised. "Really? It's just theft. We used to do this kind of thing when we were children. With the power of your family, it should be easy to bail him out." Chapter 176. What's fair or not? As long as you're happy. Sarah Mel poked her head with her finger and said, "You are too honest. Like my father said, grab whatever you like. There is nothing in this world that can't be exchanged with money and power. Well, except for great artists like Master Tiza." Jenny sighed and slowly shook her head. Although she and Sarah Mel were childhood playmates, and had similar interests in many aspects, there were some things that she still firmly believed in her own beliefs. I'll go back first. Sarah didn't say much as she waved goodbye. Jenny nodded and suddenly thought of something. Did you say that you might see him? Then, can you help me bring a letter to him? Sarah Mel raised her hand and touched her face. She smiled and said, This lady will not be a messenger. If you have something to say, then say it yourself. Weren't you very brave before? Sarah Mel smiled and touched Sarah's face. After saying that, he blinked his eyes and turned to leave. Yardtown, Rhine Castle. A carriage entered the castle. The door was pushed open and Dean got off the carriage. He followed the servant into the castle. It was dusk. Smoke was floating behind the Rhine Castle. Dinner was being prepared. In the hall of the castle, the servants stood respectfully on both sides. Although the Rhine family had declined, the etiquette of dining was still maintained. Old Fouline's children and grandchildren had arrived in the spacious dining hall. They were busy with their own things and occasionally chatting with each other. Houghton was talking to his sister when he saw Dean coming from outside. He quickly got up and greeted him. Hello, Mr. Dean. Dean shook hands. I came at the right time. Hugh laughed. Yes, Mr. Dean hasn't eaten yet. How about we eat together? Dean didn't refuse. Then I'll have to trouble you to add a pair of chopsticks. Chopsticks? Hugh was surprised, but didn't ask much. He smiled and nodded. He touched his nose and entered the dining room. Old Fouline was in the office on the second floor. Barton, Crone, and Joseph were also in the dining room. They were sitting in a corner, but no one paid attention to them. Seeing Dean enter the restaurant, the three were surprised and immediately greeted him. Dean smiled and nodded to the three. At this time, a middle-aged man with a white beard asked Hugh, This is? Houghton hurriedly introduced, This is the hunter hired by Grandpa. Hunter? There was a trace of surprise in the middle-aged man's eyes. He stepped forward and shook hands. Hello, I'm the second son of Old Fouline, Jake. Dean gently shook hands. Hello. The other people sitting in the restaurant also came forward to greet Dean. The third generation, Houghton, stood next to him. He was curious and wanted to come forward to greet Dean. However, he just nodded and called him Mr. Dean because of his status and etiquette. Mr. Dean is so young. Which consortium did you come from? Jake asked with a smile. Melon Consortium. Melon Consortium? Jake was not surprised. My father has recently founded a new consortium. It's called New World Consortium. It's really gratifying to be able to win over a young and promising hunter like you. Dean smiled, although his face was full of joy, but when Old Fouline founded the consortium, most of his children tried to stop him. Fortunately, although Old Fouline was old, he was still able to control them. After a moment, Old Fouline came to the dining hall. He was not surprised to see Dean. There was a touch of smile on his face. Mr. Dean, you came really early. The hunter who came early gets the bird to eat. Dean got up and smiled. Old Fouline waved his hand to indicate everyone to sit down. He came to the patriarch's seat with the help of the middle-aged maid. Mr. Dean, you sit next to me. Jake and the others were surprised. They didn't expect the patriarch to value Dean so much. Dean nodded slightly and sat down. Coincidentally, Jake was sitting in his seat. The smile on his face was a little stiff, but he still squeezed out a smile and moved back a seat. Let's eat, Old Fouline said to the middle-aged maid next to him. The middle-aged maid nodded and turned to another maid to pass the message. After a moment, the servants brought the dishes to the table. Old Fouline smiled at Dean. I didn't know that Mr. Dean would come today. The dinner is a bit simple, so please enjoy. Save and get rich. Dean smiled back. The dinner table looked happy and harmonious. Old Fouline wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. Mr. Dean, our Ryan family has established a new consortium. Tomorrow night will be the opening ceremony of the consortium. Many old acquaintances of the nobles will come to congratulate us. You are currently the only hunter in our consortium. I hope you can attend. Dean nodded. No problem. Grandpa, can I go too? Hugh shouted from the end of the table. Old Fouline looked at him. You don't have enough seniority. You should put your mind on your studies. When you get the Knight's Certificate of Honor, you will bring glory to our family. Hugh's face was pale as he coldly snorted. After dinner, Old Fouline called Dean into the study room to discuss some matters. The nobles who will be attending tomorrow are in a similar situation as the Ryan family. They are relatively declining. Old Feline went straight to the point after the middle-aged maid left. Some of them want to participate due to etiquette. Some of them want to see the situation of our consortium. They want to join and share the benefits. In any case, this is the first time that our consortium will show up. I hope to leave a good impression. Dean nodded. They are not the only ones who will pay attention to this party. The entire aristocratic circle will be looking at us. Yes. Old Feline deeply nodded as he saw that Dean understood. He secretly looked at the teenager. There have been many declining aristocrats who wanted to establish a consortium. They wanted to draw other declining aristocrats to join them. However, these declining aristocrats are scattered. They will be crushed by other consortia. Over time, there are very few declining aristocrats who are willing to establish a consortium. After all, the establishment fee of a consortium is not low. Now our Ryan family is desperate. The other families should have investigated very clearly. In any case, since we have taken this road, I hope to have a good start. Therefore, I intend to announce to the public that you are an intermediate hunter. In this way, we can improve the foundation of our consortium. Dean pondered for a moment and nodded. All right. In the future, we are likely to be suppressed by the Melon Consortium. Old Feline sighed. It's all up to you. Our Ryan family can't afford to toss and turn. We can't stop this giant sword. Dean smiled. Once we accumulate enough funds to rent the passage outside the giant wall, our wealth will roll faster than a snowball. Old Feline wryly smiled, although he didn't know where Dean's confidence came from. But he couldn't refute anything. Now, he could only pray. Are there alchemists behind some big aristocrats? Dean suddenly asked. Old Feline was silent for a moment. Yes, the wealth created by an alchemist master is much more than that of a hunter. Chapter 177. Old Feline looked at Dudian. You don't seem surprised. Dudian smiled. Why should I be surprised? Alchemists are evil and dark existences. Even the knights are loyal to the aristocracy. Isn't it surprising that they have dealings with these evil and dirty guys? Old Feline looked at him. Dudian faintly smiled. Everyone has a dark side. I believe that even the Pope of Light has his own secrets. So there is nothing to be surprised about. If there is no dirty means, then how can you live well? After all, the world's resources are limited. If you live well, then it means that there are people who live poorly. They will naturally try to take away your life. Old Feline silently looked at him. Did you learn all this in prison? It's a very simple rule. Everyone knows it. There is nothing to learn. Dudian indifferently said. Do you know which aristocrats have alchemists working for them? Old Feline looked at him and sighed. There are too many. Basically, all the upper-class aristocrats have some relationship with the Dark Church or alchemists. The military is no exception. Do you know who the alchemists behind the Milan and Bouron families are? Dudian asked again. Old Feline shook his head. I don't know about this. Communication between alchemists and families is extremely secretive. In addition to the patriarch's most trusted confidants, even the children of the family may not know about it, let alone outsiders. However, if you want to know more about it, you can find clues from various industries of the family. Alchemists help the aristocrats develop new products and sell them. If you can find someone who has joined the Dark Church, then you can trace the identity of the alchemist. Of course, it will cost a lot of gold coins. Dudian's eyes lit up. Does the Holy Church know about the secret communication between the aristocrats and the alchemists? They are not fools. Of course they know about it. Old Feline sighed. Although the Holy Church is powerful and has a wide range of believers, but they still rely on the aristocrats. If the economic system of the aristocracy collapses, then the losses to the civilians will be greater. Then it will cause a series of chain reactions. In our circle, it is called a currency storm. Once it happens, it will even lead to riots in various regions. This is what the Holy Church doesn't want to see. Dudian knew that the currency storm was similar to the financial crisis of the old era. So, the Holy Church is turning a blind eye? Not really. Old Feline shook his head. If there is no conclusive evidence, then it will lead to a collective backlash from other aristocrats. That's why the Holy Church is afraid of the Holy Church. Although they know that most aristocrats have contacts with the alchemists, they have no way to trace it because they don't have any evidence in their hands. Even an ancient family like the Mel will be annihilated. Dudian's eyes narrowed. It seemed that he had underestimated the power of the Holy Church. Does your family have their own shop in a yard town? Dudian changed the topic. Old Feline was surprised. Do you want to borrow it? Well, I'll borrow it for a period of time. I'll return it to you at the rental price. What are you going to do with it? Old Feline looked at him suspiciously. Sell things. There was a touch of smile on Dean's face. I happen to know an alchemist. It can be regarded as a way to make money for our consortium. What do you think? Do you know an alchemist? Old Feline's pupils shrank as he looked at him in surprise. How do you know him? Weren't you in prison before? This is my private matter. Don't ask about it, Dudian reminded. Old Feline looked at him in bewilderment. He finally gave up and asked, what faction does this alchemist friend belong to? Dudian was a little surprised. He didn't expect the old man to know so much about alchemists. He belongs to the material faction. He gave me an alchemy recipe. Tomorrow I'll go and collect the materials to make it. I should be able to make a lot of money. Old Feline was relieved. Nobles liked to deal with alchemists from the material faction. They didn't need to be polite to them like potioneers. They didn't need to be afraid of them like alchemists from the life faction. Is this the gift you gave me? Old Feline sighed. I didn't expect you to have such a background. What is the level of this alchemist? Very high, Dudian replied briefly. Old Feline didn't hear the difference in Dudian's words. Very high. If it is a 2-star or 3-star alchemist, then our Ryan family may be able to turn over a little. At least we won't be powerless in the face of suppression from other consortia. Dudian faintly smiled as he saw that Old Feline was still probing for specific information. It's getting late. I should go back. Old Feline couldn't see any thoughts from Dudian's expression. His face didn't change when he heard about a 3-star alchemist. Even if he isn't a 3-star alchemist, he should be a 2-star alchemist. Old Feline was happy as he thought of a plan. The next day, Dudian went to several nearby towns to buy yellow phosphorus, wood, red phosphorus, and other materials. He went to a more remote town and rented a small workshop with a gold coin. Then he moved the purchased materials to the workshop. In the process, Dudian thought that Old Feline would send someone to follow him. He didn't expect to smell anyone along the way. He immediately remembered that Old Feline was aware of his magic mark's ability through the Melon Consortium, so he didn't do anything in vain. It was afternoon when the materials were ready. Dudian thought of the consortium's opening party in the evening. He stopped what he was doing and prepared to go to the slave market tomorrow to hire a few workers to start the work. The night came quickly. After a whole day of decorating, the Ryan castle had become a lot livelier. The lamp oil on the walls had all been replaced with a more valuable white fat oil. The light was bright when it burned, and it didn't have any strange smell. It even had a faint fragrance. Chapter 178. An aristocratic carriage drove into Yardtown and passed by the front of the town's households. Such a grand scene surprised the townspeople. Ever since the Ryan family moved here and became their lord, they had never seen so many nobles come to visit them. The carriages stopped in front of the Ryan castle. Old Feline's butler personally stood at the door to greet the guests. Dean had come early in the afternoon to discuss matters with old Patriarch Feline. At the moment, both of them were standing in front of the window on the second floor of the castle. They were looking at the brightly lit manor. The carriages had flags of their respective families. Old Patriarch Feline introduced the origin and background of each carriage to Dean. Dean benefited a lot from this. Almost everyone has arrived. Let's go down to entertain the guests. We can't be too rude as the host. Old Feline said to Dudian. Dudian nodded. Both of them went downstairs and entered the decorated hall. Originally, there were only 4 oil lamps in the hall, but now there were more than a dozen. It was as if it was daytime. Nobles dressed in bright clothes with extraordinary temperaments were chatting with their wives and children in the hall while enjoying snacks and fine wine. The aristocrats who were chatting enthusiastically turned their eyes to them as Dudian, an old patriarch, went downstairs. It was obvious that they had been paying attention to them for a long time. "Oh, old Feline, I haven't seen you for a few years, but you still look so energetic." A middle-aged aristocrat who was standing next to the stairs saw old Feline coming downstairs. He immediately raised his glass and smiled. Dudian glanced at him. Old Feline had told him that the middle-aged man was from the Nikan family of the neighboring towns. They were also a declining, small, aristocratic family. Moreover, they were different from the Rhine family. Nikan family had been a small, aristocratic family from the beginning to the end. They had been struggling to survive until now. Old Feline gently smiled. "You're overpraising me. Are you used to drinking wine? If I had known that you have such good wine here, I would have come over earlier." The middle-aged man laughed. Old Feline smiled. "You are welcome at any time in the future." At this time, other nobles also came to greet old Feline. There were a total of 8 aristocratic families. Most of the patriarchs had come in person. Only 2 families had sent their children to congratulate old Feline because their patriarchs were too old. Old Feline was the same generation as them. As the old saying goes, a thin tiger is stronger than a wolf. A graceful lady said with a smile, "The Rhine family must want to make a big movement by establishing a consortium, right?" The others looked at old Feline with a smile. Old Feline chuckled. "Since we are establishing a consortium, we naturally want to make a lot of money. Don't you want to?" "Oh." The middle-aged man from a Nikon family asked with interest. "So, old patriarch, you have a good source of income?" Old Feline smiled. "Let's talk about this later. The party is about to begin. Let's listen to the music first. I have specially invited the master of St. Peter's Music College to come and play." Seeing him change the topic, the others didn't continue to ask. They followed old Feline into the hall. They came to the seats in front of the music stage. "Who is this?" Another fat middle-aged man asked as he looked at Dean, who was inseparable from old Feline. Old Feline smiled. "This is our consortium's hunter, Mr. Dean." "Hunter?" The nobles who were sitting next to old Feline changed their faces. They subconsciously moved away from Dudian, but soon realized that it was rude. Moreover, it was useless. So they restored their original position. The fat middle-aged man squeezed out a smile. "I didn't expect that your consortium would be able to attract hunters so quickly. It's really a fierce momentum." Dean noticed the fear in the eyes of the nobles. But he looked calm. He knew from old Feline that the existence of hunters was extremely popular and hated by the nobles. They loved hunters because they could bring wealth, but they hated hunters because they were easily angered and dangerous. There were many cases in history where hunters were out of control and killed the nobles on the spot. Although the hunters were executed by the magistrate, but the dead nobles wouldn't be resurrected. So most of the nobles didn't want to get too close to hunters. Even if they needed to pass orders, they would often use letters. Occasionally, they needed to talk face to face. They would secretly arrange knights to protect them so that they could be on guard against such a dangerous item. In the eyes of most of the nobles, they didn't see hunters as the same kind as the monsters outside the giant wall. The others knew Dean's identity, so they were a bit restrained. Dean felt familiar as he saw their smiles. He remembered the time when he attended the Melon Consortium's aristocratic party. He saw Glenn and a senior hunter from another consortium enter the hall. The nobles took the initiative to greet them. He was too young at that time, so he didn't notice the hidden fear in their smiles. But now he clearly felt it. "The concert is about to begin." Old Feline smiled. Dean looked at old Feline and saw the smile on his wrinkled face. He calmed down and quietly looked up to enjoy the music concert on the stage. There were more than 20 people in this music concert. The conductor of the concert understood old Feline's intention and slowly raised the baton in his hand. The music notes floated out and surrounded the hall. It was refreshing. Old Feline's children who were sitting at the back of the hall and the noble's children were leisurely intoxicated by the music. Suddenly, the door of the hall was pushed open. A group of figures entered the hall. One of them sneered. Old Patriarch Feline is so impatient. The banquet hasn't started yet. The flowing music came to an abrupt end. The seemingly peaceful atmosphere in the hall suddenly solidified. Everyone looked back, and their faces slightly changed. The fat middle-aged man sitting next to Dean whispered, Mel family? Milan family? How come they are here? Dean recognized the identity of the person who came. It was a slim and elegant girl. Her cheeks were extremely beautiful, like a dream. Her clothes were exquisitely tailored and had a noble temperament. There was a young man standing next to her. He was wearing a gorgeous platinum costume. His posture was straight like a knight. He had an aristocratic fencing sword on his waist. Behind the two of them were 5 or 6 knights and 2 attendants. Chapter 179. Old Feline's face was gloomy, but soon restored his calmness. He slowly stood up and said, The guests have arrived. I don't know why the two of you have come here in the middle of the night. Oh, does that mean we've come uninvited? The handsome youth's mouth curled into a smile. Is this how the Ryan family treats their guests? Old Feline coldly replied. Is this how the Milan family treats its guests? The handsome youth was slightly startled. The smile on his face disappeared. I heard that your Ryan family has applied to establish a consortium. We have come to pay a special visit. If we have taken the liberty, please forgive us. Although his words were modest, his tone and expression were still stiff. There was even a hint of sarcasm in them. Old Feline indifferently said, After all, it's less than 100 years of history. I can understand that there isn't much etiquette inheritance. The handsome youth's face sank. He rolled his eyes and suddenly smiled. Our Milan family's history can't be compared to your Ryan family's. But it's a pity that a giant tree grows old and flowers wither. Not every family can preserve their traditions and wealth. Old Feline indifferently looked at him. Today the sun will set, and tomorrow the new sun will rise. But who knows whether the new sun will follow the footsteps of the old sun? The handsome young man's face slightly changed. He was about to continue to speak, but the girl next to him smiled. Is there a great banquet tonight? How can it be so sour? Patriarch, please forgive us if we offend you. We came here on behalf of our father to congratulate you. I wish your consortium a smooth sailing and a bright future. Old Feline faintly smiled. My 2 fathers are so busy, but they still remember to worry about us. It's really a trouble for them. After all, you used to be part of our Melon consortium. We should remember you. The girl smiled. Old Feline glanced at the knights behind them. It seems that your father didn't teach you that it is forbidden to bring knights to the banquet. The handsome youth next to him narrowed his eyes and slightly sneered. Of course we know this, but I heard that there is a hunter in this banquet. I think you know about it. What if you get bitten by a hunter when you are together with such a dangerous creature? What would you do if you don't take any precautions? Of course, I believe that with your teachings, you will definitely be able to make that hunter obedient. But no matter how obedient a loyal dog is, there will always be a time when it goes crazy, right? Old Feline glanced at Dudian from the corner of his eyes. He saw that Dudian looked calm, as if he hadn't heard the words. Old Feline was relieved. Hunters are our guests and partners. I didn't think that Melon Consortium would treat their subordinates like this. It's really sad. I hope that they won't hear these words. Otherwise, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be any trouble. The handsome youth was startled. There was a trace of anger in his eyes. He wanted to attack, but was stopped by the girl next to him. I heard that the hunter you recruited was a newcomer of our Melon Consortium. Is his name Dean? The girl asked. Old Feline narrowed his eyes as he smelled the intention of attack in Dudian's words. He calmly replied, Yes, but Mr. Dean was a good friend of the Ryan family when he joined your consortium. He knew that the Ryan family used to be part of the Melon Consortium. Fortunately, Mr. Dean didn't abandon the Ryan family. He always followed us. The girl thought that Old Feline was cunning. She wanted to use the excuse of poaching to squeeze Old Feline. She didn't expect that the old fox would block her words. Is that so? The handsome youth next to her sneered. I heard that the hunter named Dean committed a crime of theft 3 years ago. He stole the Dragon Mountain ruby from the Milan family. He was sentenced to prison and the magistrate personally reviewed it. This matter shouldn't be false. Aren't you afraid that he would secretly empty your consortium's warehouse? Old Foulene indifferently said, Mr. Dean was wronged. There's a mistake in this. Mr. Dean will complain to the magistrate in the future. Besides, the Dragon Mountain ruby is one of the 3 treasures of the Milan family. It is worrying that the guards are so lax. The handsome youth clenched his fists. He was so angry that his chest was blocked. We can't win against this old fox. The girl whispered to old Foulene, I see that the banquet is about to begin. Are you going to welcome us? Old Foulene indifferently smiled. Since the 2 of you are here, then you should participate together. But it's better to leave the knights outside. It would be impolite if they offend other people. The handsome youth's eyes turned. Patriarch, I suddenly have an idea. We came in a hurry, so we didn't bring any gifts. How about we give a little performance to everyone? The other nobles looked at each other, but no one answered. Old Foulene narrowed his eyes. There is no need for gifts. How can this old man accept gifts from the younger generation? If you don't give gifts, then this junior will be a little restless. The handsome youth smiled. I have heard that the strength of the hunter surnamed Dean is extraordinary. He is an intermediate hunter. It will be better to let him cooperate with my knights, so that everyone can see the abilities of this hunter. Old Foulene's face sank. He had declared that Dean was an intermediate hunter. It was to create momentum for the consortium. The other side obviously seized this point and took the opportunity to tear him down. Duddian saw that old Foulene was hesitating, so he said, All right, since I can entertain everyone, then I will be happy. He took a few steps forward and smiled at the handsome youth. Milan family, right? You must know that the hunter's skills are mainly focused on killing. I'm not very skilled in pure performance. If I accidentally hurt your subordinates, then please forgive me. The handsome youth looked up and down at Duddian. There was a trace of killing intent in his eyes. However, there was a smile on his face. Same to you. Knights are too upright. If I accidentally hurt you, then I hope you can take care of your body. Duddian glanced at the sword on his waist. It seems that you are also a knight. It will be better for you to show your sincerity. The smile on the handsome youth's face stiffened. He was indeed a knight and had passed the knight's assessment. But after all, he was an aristocrat. The knight's identity was just to gild his body. He didn't delve deeply into it. He was just an official junior knight. In terms of pure combat, he was slightly lacking compared to a junior hunter. He had already learned the information about Dean from the Melon Consortium. He knew that Dean was a junior hunter 3 years ago, although he hadn't fully mastered the skills of a junior hunter. But he was imprisoned and tortured. But after all, a hunter's physique was still there. Nobles never fight with hunters. The handsome youth said generously. Duddian smiled. But you're also a knight, right? Shouldn't you have the courage of a knight? In the blink of an eye, it was the last day of the month. We were behind by 10 days and 1,000 monthly votes. We were behind by 300 monthly votes. We were short by 700 monthly votes. Well, old Gupta didn't use too much strength. Otherwise, he should be able to catch up more. Chapter 180. The handsome youth's face changed. Duddian had used the knight's spirit to force him, so he had no reason to retreat. Although he was an aristocrat, and the knight's identity was just a gilded book, but he had passed through layers of tests to obtain this identity, so he still had some knight's spirit. At the moment, under the watchful eyes of the public, even if he tried to defend himself, others would think that he was afraid. There was a surge of anger in his heart. He was about to agree, but the girl next to him suddenly said, Vic is just a guest who came to congratulate us. How can a guest personally come to the battlefield? You men will inevitably get injured. If you hurt him, then it will be a bit rude. Dean narrowed his eyes as he saw the girl cleverly catch his words. Really? Since a beautiful lady, like you can see that he will be injured by me, then there is really no need to compare notes. After all, there's a need to interact with each other in order to liven things up. If it is a one-sided fight, then it will lose my grace. The corner of his mouth slightly curved, revealing a faint sarcastic arc. At the moment his back was facing the other nobles, so no one noticed the change in his expression. The handsome youth Vic, and the girl could see it clearly. The girl frowned and was about to open her mouth again. Vic suddenly snorted. "Since you are so confident, I would like to see if the hunter is really as powerful as the rumors say." Dudian waved his hand and shook his head. "No, I don't want to hurt you. This lady can see that you are no match for me. Why bother to show off?" The girl frowned. She was trying to exonerate Vic. She didn't expect that her words would become a weakness of Dudian's attack. Vic was riding a tiger and couldn't back down. "Whether I can win or not, we will know after the fight." Vic's eyes were full of murderous intent. "I will liven things up for Patriarch Feline. If you get hurt by my sword, then don't blame me for not reminding you." Dudian shook his head. "I am afraid that I will hurt you and sweep your face. Since it is a fight, it is normal to get injured. You should pay attention to yourself." Vic slowly held the sword at his waist and pulled it out inch by inch. "Get ready to start." "Master, don't." A middle-aged knight hurriedly whispered to stop him. Vic's face sank. "Don't stop me." The middle-aged knight looked at him and sighed. He knew that he wasn't being impulsive, but was forced to fight by the boy who was a few years younger than him. He couldn't help but hate Dean. The girl sighed as she looked at Dudian. She took a few steps back and came to the edge of the hall under the protection of the knights of the Mel family, so as to avoid being accidentally injured. The smile on Dean's face slowly disappeared. He quietly looked at him and made a gentleman's gesture. "Please." Vic saw a flaw in Dudian's armpit. He suddenly straightened up and thrust his sword. Dean's body flashed. He was like a shadow as he bypassed Vic's sword and arrived in front of Vic. Their eyes stared at each other. Vic's pupils shrank. Although he had expected the hunter's physique to be extraordinary, he didn't think that it would be so much stronger than him. He was about to wave his sword to block, but saw Dean's palm coming towards him. Vic's body retreated a few steps. He staggered and almost fell down. His neck was slightly twisted to the side. His fair and handsome face suddenly became slightly rosy. However, the rosy outline of his face was like a palm print. "Bold!" The middle-aged knight rushed out and stopped in front of Vic. He pulled out the sword from his waist and pointed at Dean. "Damn civilian! Kneel down." Dudian quickly said, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Vic recovered from the dizziness. He felt a burning pain on his cheek. His heart was filled with anger as he heard Dean's words. He turned around and was about to scold Dean. However, he almost spat out a mouthful of blood when he saw Dean. He saw Dean holding his palm. His face was full of concern and worry as he looked at his 5 fingers. He repeatedly said, "Did I hurt you? Does it hurt? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you suffer like this." What was provocation? What did it mean to bully others too much? Vic felt that his lungs were going to explode. His blood was boiling as he saw the astonished eyes of the nobles and their children. Although he didn't have a mirror, but he could imagine how embarrassing and shameful he was at the moment. Kill him." Vic's teeth creaked as he roared in anger. The middle-aged knight clenched his sword and stared at Dean coldly. He took a step forward and continued to sweep his sword. His sword was as fast as a streamer. Even the shadow of the sword could be seen in the air. Dean didn't expect the middle-aged knight's physique to be so extraordinary. It should be close to the physique of an intermediate hunter. However, he didn't know whether the knight had magic marks in his body or not. Thinking of this, Dean decided to end the fight quickly. His body continued to retreat. He suddenly raised his hand to feign an attack, but the real move was to sweep his foot. The middle-aged knight's sword chopped at Dean's wrist. He didn't expect Dean to stop halfway. But the middle-aged knight was extremely experienced. He quickly thought that a killing move must be the opposite of a feint. The idea flashed in his mind. His lower body instinctively retreated and narrowly escaped Dean's foot. Dean didn't stare as he didn't hit the middle-aged knight. He quickly moved forward and raised his hand to pinch the middle-aged knight's arm. "Open for me." The middle-aged knight's arm shook. He wanted to block Dean's 5 fingers, but the next moment he felt a sharp pain coming from the part of his arm that was pinched. He couldn't help but raise his other hand to break the siege. Dean reacted quickly. He grabbed the other hand with his right hand. He raised his toe and fiercely hit the middle-aged knight's nose. Bang! The middle-aged knight's head tilted back and blood spurted out of his nose. Dean took this opportunity to raise his right hand and hit the elbow of the middle-aged knight's arm that was pinched. Gotcha! The middle-aged knight's arm that was holding the sword suddenly bent in a terrible posture. The middle-aged knight screamed in pain. He loosened his hand, and the sword fell to the ground. The other 3 knights didn't think that their captain would be defeated. They quickly pulled out their swords and rushed up to Dean. Dean punched the middle-aged knight's chest with his left hand. The middle-aged knight was sent flying. He turned around and coldly looked at the other 3 knights. The cold, killing intent in his eyes was like an unrestrained beast. The 3 knights stopped their footsteps. They clenched their swords and trembled as they looked at Dean. Chapter 181. Stop! The girl and old Foline shouted at the same time. The 3 young knights couldn't help but look at Vic. At the moment, Vic's face was full of horror. He knew how powerful the middle-aged knight was. He was an intermediate knight. Even in the Knight's Hall, he could be ranked in the top 500. How could he be defeated by Dean? Moreover, it was an overwhelming defeat. Didn't this mean that Dean was much stronger than an intermediate knight? As the young master of the Milan family, he naturally knew the gap between a knight and a hunter. Hunters often fought with monsters outside the giant wall. Whether it was combat awareness or killing skills, they were incomparable to knights. Although they were both fighting professions, but the two had different routes. Knights were glorious and protected aristocrats. They were praised by bards. However, hunters were much darker. Even ordinary civilians weren't qualified to know about the existence of hunters. To be able to defeat Uncle M.O. so quickly, he is definitely not as simple as a primary hunter. Vic's heart repeatedly turned over this idea. He looked at Dean in horror. The image of hunters in the eyes of aristocrats was not commendable. From the beginning of the birth of this profession, they were labeled as madmen, tyrannical, and so on. Even the aristocrats who had to use hunters to earn wealth were extremely afraid of these existences. This was why senior hunters got preferential treatment from consortiums. Even the aristocrats had to greet them with a smile. Old Foline, the girl, as well as the aristocrats and their children, were secretly shocked. Some of the aristocratic children were dumbfounded. They couldn't speak a word. In the eyes of these small nobles, there was almost no chance for them to see a hunter in action. They only heard about the danger and strength of a hunter from the mouth of other nobles. In their eyes, the most powerful existence was undoubtedly a knight. But they didn't expect that at this moment, this young boy would be able to defeat a knight wearing an intermediate medal so quickly and neatly. This simply subverted their understanding. Old Foline was also shocked, but he was more surprised. Although he had heard the description of his strength from Dean's mouth, he wasn't completely convinced. After all, he knew how thin Dean's resume was. He could barely be regarded as a primary hunter. Even if he was witty and cunning, it was still a soft power. Moreover, there would be no blessings from God in prison, only pain and suffering. At the same time, he hurriedly walked out on crutches. He turned to look at Dean and whispered, "Don't be rude." Dean nodded slightly. On the surface, he was just a hunter hired by the consortium. Naturally, he had to be obedient to Old Foline. It's inevitable to accidentally injure each other. Old Foline turned his head and apologized to Vic. "Are you okay?" Vic saw Dude Yen's unapologetic eyes. His chest was suffocating with anger, but he couldn't vent it. He stared at Dudien and waved. "Let's go." Now that things had come to this, he naturally wouldn't pretend to be polite anymore. After all, everyone was well aware of it. The girl sighed and said to Dean, "I didn't expect that such an unpleasant thing would happen today. This is a matter between our consortiums. You're just a hired hunter. Why do you have to intervene? I wanted to ask you for a poem." She shook her head with regret. Dean was startled. He suddenly remembered that the girl's cheeks were a bit familiar. It seemed that she was the daughter of the Mel family, Sarah Mel, whom he had met at the aristocratic gathering. Since it is a matter between consortiums, you shouldn't humiliate a hunter in front of him. Dean stared at her and said in a cold voice, "Although in the eyes of the aristocracy, Hunters are just dogs that make money for you. But don't forget that it is the hunters who risk their lives to fight outside the giant wall to send wealth back to the giant wall. The oil lamps that you have lit are taken out of the monsters by the hunters. The fur clothes that you are wearing are peeled from the monsters by the hunters. Sarah sighed and said, "You're right, but this is the hunter's job, isn't it? Moreover, this is your own choice. You can gain a lot of money while taking risks." Dean quietly looked at her beautiful face. Since it is a cooperative relationship, then there should be at least a minimum of respect. Hunters have to work hard to earn what they get. Don't take it for free. Sarah Mel was silent. "You are right. But I have never looked down on hunters. But this is a matter between consortiums and aristocracy. It is not good for you to get involved. By the way, there is one thing I want to tell you. Jenny knows that you are out, but she is locked at home by her father. She can't come out to see you. If you have anything you want to tell her, I can help you pass it to her." Dean's eyes slightly moved, but restored his calmness. He indifferently said, "If there is a will, then no one can lock me up. If there is no intention, then I will be surrounded by giant walls." Sarah Mel looked at him and said, "Are you still holding a grudge against being in prison? It is not her fault." "I know." Dean quietly looked at her. "It is not anyone's fault. I have to thank someone for waking me up. They let me know what the real thing is." "What is it?" Sarah Mel slightly frowned. "Is it hatred?" Dean's eyes swept over her figure. "You should go back." Sarah Mel was slightly stifled. "It is very impolite to expel a lady. That's why I'm not a noble," Dean said. Sarah Mel choked again. Her fingers pulled the hem of her skirt. "I don't know how Jenny talks to you. Every sentence she says can make people angry. Take care." After Sarah Mel and Vic left, Old Feline took Dean back to the music stage. He said to the crowd, "Everyone, please sit down. It is still early, so let's continue." The nobles looked at him and then looked at Dean. Although many of them were worried about the retaliation of Mel family and Milan family, but Old Feline's side didn't seem to be a good person. Especially the bloody and brutal scene of Dean breaking the middle-aged knight's arm. Everyone was deeply shocked. They were afraid that it would cause Dean to be unhappy. Anyway, they were here. Let's wait until the end of the banquet. The nobles thought to themselves and sat down as they were told. "Please continue." Old Feline raised his hand to the conductor on the stage. The conductor hesitated. He looked at Dean, who was next to him. He felt his scalp tingling. He took 2 deep breaths to restore his mind to a stable state. He turned back to the rest of the orchestra and stood back to his original position. The music slowly rose. The melodious music echoed in the hall. Old Feline and Dean, who were sitting in the front row, were listening to the music with a smile on their faces. They were enjoying the music. The other nobles in the back looked at Dean from time to time. Various thoughts were running through their minds. The night was getting dark. The nobles returned to their carriages after the banquet. Old Feline and Dean were at the door. They watched the carriages disappear into the night in front of the manor. Old Feline said, "Let's go upstairs." Dean nodded. Old Feline told the butler to change the lamp oil and clean up the hall. He and Dean went to the study on the 2nd floor with the help of the middle-aged maid. After the middle-aged maid left, Old Feline asked Dean, "Are you hurt?" Dean shook his head. The Milan family and Mel family didn't come to suppress the consortiums. Especially Vic from the Milan family. His target from the beginning seemed to be me. Was it because he knew that I was bailed out and was worried that I would retaliate against him? So he acted in advance? Chapter 182. So, what was the reason why he attacked me? Dudian asked. Old Feline pondered for a moment. I remember that 2 years ago, the Milan family seemed to be preparing for a marriage with the Boron family. I don't know if it was because of this matter. Marriage? Dudian was startled. After a moment, he asked, "What was the result?" "It didn't work." Old Feline shook his head. Miss Jenny of the Boron family didn't agree. In addition, the Mel family may have secretly intervened to prevent the marriage. After all, once the marriage between the Milan family and the Boron family is successful, it will form a greater force. The Mel family is the most disadvantageous one in the consortium. Although the Mel family and the Burong family are friends, but the grudges between the nobles are difficult to explain in a few words. Dudien looked at him. No wonder the Mel family and the Milan family have come to make trouble today. The Mel family's daughter is young, but she doesn't look as simple and ignorant as she looks. Old Fuline smiled. No matter how cunning the fox is, it will eventually be defeated by experience. Dudien nodded and admitted that this was the truth. But today you have humiliated the Milan family in front of them. They won't let you go. Old Fuline sighed. Although we are independent from the Melon Consortium, but occasionally we can endure it. Dudien said, some I can endure, but some don't deserve to be endured. There's a word called self-humiliation. The Milan family won't spread today's matter. They won't be able to accuse me of offending the nobles. They will only play tricks behind the scenes. But even if we are polite, we shouldn't pray for others to attack since they are hostile. Old Feline looked at him. He always had an illusion that he wasn't talking to a teenager, but a mature adult in his 30s. He couldn't help but think of some outstanding figures in history. Most of them showed amazing talent in certain aspects when they were children. Perhaps the talent of the youth in front of him would become an outstanding figure in the future, but it would be by no means positive. The Milan family cares about their face, so they won't spread it out. Old Feline looked at Dudien and said, but there is no impenetrable wall in the world. The news that you can easily defeat an intermediate knight will spread to the whole circle. Although it won't be reported in the newspapers, but you will become famous in the circle. However, being famous may not be a good thing. Dudien said, Melon Consortium should take immediate measures. In any case, we have to make money as soon as possible. We have to rent our own passage and cultivate our own hunters. Old Feline smiled. I can only rely on you. Dudien nodded. He got up and said goodbye as he thought about the small workshop. I'll go back first. By the time he left the Rhine castle, it was already late and the curfew time had arrived. Dudien's carriage was decorated with the flag of the Rhine family. There were curfew soldiers on the road, but they weren't stopped. Back to the small workshop, Dudien checked the materials and confirmed that there were no errors. Then he lay down on the container and went to sleep. The next day, Dudien went to the slave market in the western part of the commercial district. He spent 20 silver coins to pick 20 slaves. Most of the slaves were of the Blanc race. They were healthy. There were 10 men and 10 women. Their age ranged from 18 to 25 years old. Most of the people who sold the slaves were aristocrats, bankrupt, wealthy merchants, depressed knights, and so on. They couldn't support too many slaves and servants, so they could only consign them for sale. Dudien didn't directly transfer the ownership of the slaves to his name, but to the Rhine family. He took the slaves to the small workshop that he had rented. He taught them the simple production process. Each person only needed to learn how to make their own environment. Dudien selected a middle-aged man called Harrison, who was a butler of a knight family. He replaced him to manage the workshop. Throughout the day, Dudien taught the slaves how to make and supervise their work. In the evening, Dudien counted the finished goods. There were less than 1,000 boxes. The cost of materials is about 2 silver coins. If I want to sell the matches quickly, I have to enter the market at a very low price. Each box is 2 copper coins. 1,000 boxes is 20 silver coins. The revenue ratio is 10 to 1. Dudien calculated in his mind. Yes, the first thing he made was the match. Although in alchemy, the match was not classified as a forbidden technique like explosives. The alchemy structure of the match was relatively simple. Yellow phosphorus, red phosphorus, and other basic materials could be used and combined. But in this period without electricity, the match could quickly replace the fire sickle. After all, the ignition efficiency of the fire sickle was slow and the weight was heavy. These 2 points would be defeated by the advantage of the match. Although the match was only a small item, but it was a consumable. It meant that there would always be a demand. Once the match replaced the position of the fire sickle, the money earned would not be inferior to other precious items. 20 silver coins a day is too slow. 10 days is only 2 gold coins. Dudien thought about the previous production process. The work efficiency of the 20 slaves was very fast. The reason why only 1,000 boxes were made was that the process of cutting the matchsticks took the most time. 10 slaves cutting the matchsticks couldn't catch up with the speed of the others making the matchsticks and the boxes. I have to build a machine to cut the matchsticks, Dudian thoughtfully said. But the emergence of machinery is bound to be noticed by people. Then they will start to research and develop it. Other consortia can rely on their powerful financial resources and channels to make me, the inventor, unable to find any market. I can only starve to death. In that case, it is better to personally open up the Steam era. Dudian's eyes were secretly firm. If others copied his products, then he would make sure that the speed of copying couldn't catch up with the speed of his invention. After renting a few dilapidated houses for the slaves to live in, Dudian returned overnight to the Rhine castle. The carriage had just entered the yard town. Suddenly, the horses in front of the carriage screamed in panic. The carriage was shaking from side to side. The coachman was worried that he would disturb Dudian. He angrily waved his whip and shouted. Dudian came back to his senses. He lifted the curtain and looked out. There was nothing on the street in the dark night. Chapter 183. Puff. At the same time, a sharp dagger suddenly jumped out from under the seat and smashed the board under the carriage. The arm that held the dagger was extremely slender. It belonged to a woman. She quickly retracted the dagger after the attack failed. Dean's eyes flashed as he quickly jumped out of the carriage. Ugh! A painful groan suddenly sounded in front of the carriage. In the darkness, a slender figure covered the coachman's mouth with a hand, and a dagger quickly slit his throat. The middle-aged coachman, who earned money to support his family, widened his eyes, but he didn't let out a scream. His body softly fell to the ground. The horses that were pulling the carriage were frightened and ran forward. In the night, in the cold wind, on the long street, Dean and the female assassin looked at each other in silence. Don't be nervous. Suddenly, the female assassin raised her hand and said in a sweet voice, Do you remember me? She pulled down her mask as she spoke. Dean's heart palpitated as he saw her face. Glenn? The female assassin who came to assassinate him turned out to be Glenn? It seems that you have a good memory. Glenn smiled and put away the dagger. The consortium sent me to assassinate you, but I owe you a favor 3 years ago. This time I will return it to you. Dean was startled, but still didn't relax his body. In that case, why did you kill him? Him? Glenn looked at the coachman lying in a pool of blood on the ground. She smiled and said, He's just an ordinary, unlucky fellow. If I don't kill him, the consortium will know that I've been merciful. Your favor isn't enough for me to offend the consortium. This is why I attacked you just now. If I really wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have let you sense it in advance and avoid it. Please believe in the hunting ability of a senior assassin. Dean was silent for a moment. You mean that the personnel of the Melon Consortium will investigate today's matter? Is there someone from the Melon Consortium in the Rhine family? Isn't it normal? Glenn looked at him and gently smiled. There is nothing that money can't do. Even if a son kills his father, it's just a matter of the number of chips. Dean's heart was cold. How are you going to explain to the consortium if you let me go? The corner of Glenn's mouth revealed a trace of smile. It's very simple. Just say that your magic marks have sensed me and failed your sneak attack. After all, the consortium has already classified you as an intermediate hunter. After all, the magic marks are rare monsters. So what kind of abilities will they have after the second and third evolution is still unknown. Dean couldn't help but recall the monster atlas that he had seen before. There was a description of the abilities, characteristics, habitat, and other information of the rare monsters. But the atlas came from the inner wall, so the inner wall had the final say on how to rate the monsters. Thank you. Dudian whispered. He believed in Glenn's words. If she really wanted to sneak attack him, then she could use the Black Weaver magic marks to quietly get close to him and hunt him down. Even if she failed to hunt him down, he was by no means Glenn's opponent in a head-on battle. You are lucky, Glenn laughed. There are 2 senior hunters in the consortium. One is me, and the other is a knight. They're good at frontal combat. That's why they sent me over. Otherwise, your life would have ended here. Dean stared at her. Is it worth it to take such a big risk to let me go because of a small favor from 3 years ago? What if the higher-ups blame you? Let them do it. Glenn shrugged her shoulders, indicating that she didn't care. Don't think too highly of these nobles. They still rely on us to make money for them. In the end, we're just their dogs. Since they treat you as a dog, you still have to work hard to be a loyal dog. That's the saddest thing. Dean deeply looked at her. I will remember this favor. If there is a chance in the future, I will return it to you. There is no need. Glenn waved her hand. It's just canceled out. I'm a person of my word. Moreover, I don't think you'll have any future. They sent me to kill you, so they'll most likely use other means. You and the nobles behind you will be in big trouble. She turned around and walked down the street. We'll meet again. Her figure disappeared into the night, flying away. Dean looked at her back as she left. He was silent for a long time. Then he slowly walked in the direction of the carriage. His cold heart was full of killing intent. He expected that the Melon Consortium would retaliate, but he didn't think that it would be so fast and so ruthless. They would directly hire a senior hunter to assassinate him. It should be known that senior hunters were the strongest force in the outer wall. They were second only to the magistrate's punishers. If a senior hunter was used to assassinate an aristocrat, then the magistrate would track them down and kill them. But if they killed a senior hunter, then the situation would be completely different. It would be easy to cover up, especially a small aristocrat like the Ryan family, who had no background. Once Dean was killed, then a little pressure would be exerted on the Ryan family. Then the Ryan family wouldn't dare to retaliate, let alone complain about Dean. Glenn's assassination attempt failed. She probably won't try to assassinate him again, but I still have to be careful. Dadian walked alone in the cold wind of the night. His thoughts were getting clearer. Direct assassination won't work. Most of the time, they will crush the Ryan family through various industries and channels of the consortium, as well as other affiliated forces and rich businessmen. I have to raise money as soon as possible. The chill in Dean's eyes was getting stronger. If he was a senior hunter, then it would be like a thorn in the throat for the Melon Consortium. In the end, the strategy was auxiliary. Strength was fundamental. Dean tore his clothes before returning to the Ryan castle. He disguised it as if he had just fought a fierce battle. Although Glenn had come here to return a favor, she was too proud to mention this to him. But how could he not know that if he went back in one piece, Glenn's previous fake assassination attempt would be in vain? Dadian returned to the Ryan castle. Although old Feline and his children were asleep, but they were still awakened by Dadian. Old Feline's face turned extremely ugly as he saw Dean's embarrassed appearance. He took Dean back to his study room and strictly ordered the servants and his children not to spread what they saw today. Is it the Melon Consortium? Old Feline asked in a hurry. Is the injury serious? The weak expression on Dean's face disappeared as he entered the room. The assassin is Glenn. Glenn. Feline's pupils shrank. Is it her? Chapter 184. Old Feline was startled. Do you know where we can get orders for textiles? Dadian said, I need a textile factory. Try your best to get a large one. Then get all the orders for textiles. We will make textiles and sell them together with the other product that the alchemist gave me. We will raise the money to rent the channels outside the giant wall as soon as possible. Old Feline was surprised. Textiles? It will take a long time to earn a lot of money with the funds and manpower in our hands. I have my own way. Dadian stared at him. Remember to get all the orders that you can get. If I remember correctly, the rent for the channels outside the giant wall is 100,000 gold coins per year, right? Yes. Old Feline smiled. I sold the mine in Red Leaf Mountain for less than 10,000 gold coins. For a family like ours, it would take us a lifetime to earn 100,000 gold coins. A fallen aristocrat could barely maintain the expenses of an aristocrat, even if they had some land and taxes. The income they could accumulate was not as much as a senior hunter. A senior hunter like Glenn could easily take out tens of thousands of gold coins. She could get a reward of tens of thousands of gold coins if she submitted a named beast. If it was a rare named beast, then the reward would be several times, or even 10 times more. Dudian whispered, "We can only make small profits but quick sales. If we use the previous textile production technology, then the efficiency will be slow. Naturally, it will be difficult to make money in a short period of time. But if we increase the efficiency by 10 times or even a dozen times, then the speed of making money won't be too slow." 10 times? Old Feline was stunned. "How? I will improve the textile machine." Dean said, "Hire some tailors as soon as possible and get ready to start work. Now that Melon Consortium has made their move, they will try to suppress us economically. If we don't raise money as soon as possible, then all channels will be blocked in the future. The situation will be more dangerous. I hope you don't hide anything." Old Feline looked at him. He naturally understood the current situation. In fact, this was the situation he was most worried about. The Melon Consortium was a behemoth for them. They had too many forces and industries under their control. They could completely shut them out. "I will do it as soon as possible." Old Feline hesitated. "Improved textile machine? What kind of improvement?" "You'll know when the time comes." Dean continued. "In addition, send your people to follow me tomorrow to take over the alchemy product. At present, the workshop has entered the production stage. Although the efficiency isn't fast, but we can slowly sell it and make a name for ourselves." Old Feline wryly smiled. "Fame? How difficult is that?" "Trust me," Dudian encouraged. Old Feline sighed. There was no other way but to believe in Dudian. "How about this? I will go and win over other nobles. Although they are declining nobles, but we can share some of the burden." Speaking of which, after the last gathering, there were 2 families that wanted to join our consortium, but I haven't given them a reply yet. Their request is a bit too much. If I talk to them later, I should be able to lower their request. Don't think about it. Dudian shook his head. I said that we don't need other nobles to join us unless they are comparable to the Mel family. If they're willing to join us, then they won't make excessive demands. Other nobles can provide too little help, and it will affect our efficiency. Sometimes more people doesn't mean more power. Garbage is garbage, but when they gather together, it will become a garbage heap. Old Feline smiled as he saw Dudian's decisive attitude. "Well, I can only pray that your alchemy product will create a good fortune." The next day, Old Feline called the butler early in the morning. He led the servants and guards to the small workshop that Dudian had told him about. Old Feline called his 3rd son, a middle-aged gentleman with short brown hair. His name was Sandro. He was the next successor of Old Feline. Old Feline ordered Sandro to clean up the family's fruit packaging factory and turn it into a textile factory. The entire Ryan Castle felt the severity and urgency from Old Feline, especially Old Feline's 4 children. Their trusted maids had told them about Dudian's injury last night. Sandro and Jake were more concerned about the changes in the family. They had faintly speculated some things and felt the crisis that the family was facing. Dudian was lying in a guest room in the Rhine Castle. He claimed to be recuperating from his injuries. Melon Consortium Hunter's headquarters. A young man and a woman were sitting opposite each other in a luxurious dining room. They looked like an ordinary couple. However, if one looked closely, they would notice that there were some strange scars on their fingers and wrists. They weren't as smooth as ordinary people's. "I heard that the consortium had sent you to assassinate an intermediate hunter." The youth cut the steak and put it into his mouth. He looked at the woman opposite him. No wonder Rudolph didn't want to believe it. Even I didn't believe it. The woman was Glenn. She gently took a sip of red wine. "I've done it. It's up to him to believe it or not. What can he do to me if he doesn't believe it?" The youth helplessly smiled. "After all, we are just vassals of the aristocracy. Occasionally, we have to pay attention to the views of these guys. Do you remember Gerber? He was killed by these guys. Although they love money, but they are arrogant. It's better not to offend them." Glenn's face sank. The knife in her hand suddenly broke. The youth didn't say anything as he saw this. He decided to change the topic. "Recently, I heard that Huashan Consortium encountered an unknown monster outside the giant wall. They suffered heavy losses. 2 intermediate hunters were killed, and 1 senior hunter was seriously injured. Do you think they encountered a rare adult monster? Glenn indifferently said. Then you have to be careful. You don't have the ability to protect yourself. The youth shrugged his shoulders. Anyway, it's not in our consortium's territory. Otherwise, those crazy madmen would definitely ask us to help them hunt the monster. Glenn indifferently said, The monster isn't dead. Who knows when it will run into our territory? Then we can only pray to the god of light. The youth smiled. He saw that the maid had delivered the newspaper on time. He reached out and took it. After a moment, he was surprised. Ryan family's subordinate hunter was injured. Bedridden? Chapter 185. Oh, Glenn's eyebrows slightly twitched as she heard the youth's words. She understood and felt warm in her heart. There was a trace of smile on her indifferent face. The youth looked at her in surprise. Is it true or false? Did you really attack him, but you didn't kill him? Glenn raised her head and glanced at him, saying, What else? Who is this person? How could he escape your assassination? The youth asked in an incredulous tone. Glenn indifferently said, He used to be a newcomer in our consortium. His magic marks are called the Defiler. You should know that it is one of the strongest perceptual magic marks. It has a strong sense of smell in its primary stage. I don't know what other abilities it will have after the second mutation, but it should be a perceptual type. Unfortunately, the information in the atlas is too incomplete. The Defiler's magic marks? The youth was surprised. He couldn't help but ask. Your Black Weaver is a rare named monster. It has a strong concealment and assassination ability in its primary stage. Moreover, you are a senior hunter. Now, after the second mutation, how could you be perceived by a first mutation? Glenn indifferently said, There is a huge gap between rare magic marks. Moreover, the evaluation given by the inner wall may not be completely accurate. Sometimes some of the named monsters will be mutated, and their abilities will be more difficult to figure out. The youth sighed. This is also true. But even if the sneak attack failed, you could still kill him by force, right? But this kid is very cunning. If I continue to pursue, then my identity would be exposed. Glenn indifferently said, I don't want to take the risk. The youth disagreed. Even if it is exposed, it doesn't matter. If the Ryan family doesn't have an intermediate hunter, then they won't have the strength to compete with our consortium. They can only obediently admit defeat. Otherwise, the Melon Consortium will bankrupt them. I have been criticized by the top. Do you want to come and enjoy yourself? Glenn glanced at him. The youth was surprised. Well, let's eat. Let's eat. Ryan Castle, in a room with simple decorations. Old Feline slowly pushed the door and came in. He saw Dudian lying on the bed. He said, The textile factory will be finished by tonight. The difficult part is the recruitment of tailors. It will be difficult to gather enough people in a short time unless they are willing to pay a high price. Try to recruit as many as you can. Dudian looked at him. Is there any movement from the Melon Consortium? Old Feline smiled. As you expected, the Melon Consortium has failed to assassinate you. So they are ready to use economic suppression. In this morning's newspaper, the news agency of the Melon Consortium reported that you were seriously injured and bedridden. The 2 aristocrats who wanted to join our consortium sent people early in the morning to withdraw their requests. As for the remaining aristocrats, 2 of them began to discredit our consortium under the instigation of the Melon Consortium. Our reputation in the outside world is very bad. Dudian's eyes were deep as he looked at the vase in front of the window. He whispered, Next, they will investigate our industry. They will take away our customers and completely strangle our economy. Old Feline couldn't help but look at him. Since you have expected this, what should we do now? Dudian said, Don't panic. They will start to take away the business of the other shops under your family. It will take a little time. You should take this opportunity to pick up the textile orders. If they intervene, then pick up the orders at a price lower than the market price. Even a Melon Consortium won't be able to suppress the expulsion of interests. Fully smiled bitterly and said, "If they are determined to intervene, these orders will also be stopped." Dudian looked at him. "Isn't this good? The liquidated damages are enough for us to make a lot of money." Old Feline came to his senses. He couldn't help but sigh. "It seems that I'm really old. If you want to retire, then wait until this time." Dudian said to him, "Take advantage of the time to pick up the orders before they react." "All right." Old Feline nodded and turned away. The night was getting darker. In the evening, after dinner, Dudian was led by Old Feline and his third son Sander to a factory on the outskirts of the yard town. The factory was relatively spacious. There were dozens of newly purchased textile machines in the factory. Old Feline looked at Dudian. "What tools do you want? I have prepared them for you." Dudian glanced at Sander. "After I finish the transformation, everyone must keep it a secret. Otherwise, the improved textile machines will soon appear in the eyes of other consortiums. Then we will lose our advantage." Old Feline nodded. "I know. I will keep it a secret." Dudian saw that Old Feline knew the seriousness of the matter, so he didn't say anything more. In this era, there was no patent protection except for alchemy. People generally didn't have copyright awareness, so they could only rely on themselves to keep it a secret. There was no difference in essence from the old era. No company would publish the core technology of their products. Once it was leaked, it would be a devastating disaster. Dudian came to a textile machine and opened the toolbox next to it. He adjusted the spinning wheel of the textile machine and at the same time erected the spindles. He made some modifications and increased the number of spindles from 1 to 5. Moreover, all of them were erected on the textile machine. He wound a cotton thread and placed all 5 spindles on a spinning wheel. Then he pushed the spinning wheel. In an instant, all 5 spindles were spinning. Compared to the original spinning with a single spindle, the efficiency had increased by 5 times. Old Feline and Sander were stunned. They looked at the 5 cotton threads being spun at the same time. They didn't expect Dudian's improvement to be so fast and the effect to be so amazing. "Is this the new textile machine that you improved?" Old Feline stared at Dudian. As a businessman, he knew that this textile machine was a terrible money-making monster. Dudian nodded slightly. This was his improvement. He had seen the knowledge when he was studying the Blackfire formula. The improvement of the new textile machine wasn't complicated. However, it was this improved textile machine that opened the prelude to the steam era in the history of the old era. It pushed the inefficient manual era to the mechanical era. "It's amazing." Sander was amazed. Chapter 186. Even 1 or 200 spindles wouldn't be a problem if it's seriously improved, right? Old Feline's vision was sharp. He saw the key to the new textile machine. If the machine was large enough, it could accommodate hundreds of spindles. The textile efficiency would be increased by hundreds of times. It was an absolute miracle. It was equivalent to the workload of one person. It would be equivalent to the workload of hundreds of people. The overall textile efficiency within the giant wall would be improved to an appalling level. Dudian said, "We need to rebuild a new textile machine to accommodate 200 spindles. The old textile machine can't afford it. The new one will take at least 10 days to complete. For the time being, we will use the improved primary version of the textile machine. The spindles can be increased to 20. This is the limit of the textile machine." Dudian squatted down to continue the transformation. Old Feline sighed. "I didn't expect you to have such a talent. If there is a big consortium to cultivate you, you will certainly become an upper-class person." There was a trace of regret in his tone. Dudian continued, "If you have the ability, then cultivate yourself. You don't need to rely on other people's wings to grow." Old Feline was startled. "What you said seems to be reasonable." Sander lowered his head as he heard Dudian's words. He knew that Dudian was referring to something else. Dudian asked, "How are the orders?" "Today I went to all textile mills and textile chambers of commerce. There were a lot of orders." Old Feline sighed. "I thought that there would be a backlog in my hands." But after seeing your new, improved textile machine, I'm confident that I can finish all of them." Dudian slightly frowned. "Continue to pick them up tomorrow. Pick up all the orders that can be picked up." "Pick up?" Old Feline was surprised. "Even if we use your new textile machine, it will take a long time to finish all the orders. We will lose money if we don't deliver the goods on time." "No, believe me," Dudian firmly said. Old Feline and Sander looked at each other. They were at a loss. They didn't know where Dudian's confidence came from. Could it be that the new textile machine could be changed? "Well, I'll try." Old Feline couldn't change Dudian's mind. The night deepened. Old Feline was old, so he went back to rest after staying for a while. Sander stayed with Dean to accompany him. Sander stood on the side. He didn't know how to talk with Dean. He wanted to sit down and rest, but he felt that it was impolite to see Dean working so hard. He could only stand on the side. His legs were sore. Dean finished the 6th textile machine. He looked back at Sander. "Take a rest if you are tired." Sandro was already drowsy from watching the battle, but he quickly reacted and said, "No, I'm fine." Other people in the family treated Dean as a hunter. Although their attitude was polite, but it was because Dean was the main source of income for the Ryan family. However, Sandro, who was regarded as the next patriarch by Old Feline, knew that Dean was the mastermind of the consortium. The youth in front of him was the real master behind the consortium. The Ryan family was just a cover. Dean didn't say much and continued to work. The night passed. Dean had finished the improvement of 23 textile machines. They were ready to put into work. Dean asked the exhausted Sandro to call the tailors and get ready to start work. He continued to improve the remaining 20 or so textile machines. The sooner he finished the improvement, the sooner he could put them into work. Soon, more than 30 tailors recruited by the Ryan Consortium entered the factory under the leadership of Sandro. Most of these tailors were in their 20s or 30s, and 7 or 8 of them were old men with white hair on their temples. After arriving at the factory, they immediately saw a set of strange textile machines in front of them. Each machine had 20 spindles standing upright, which was extremely eye-catching. An experienced middle-aged tailor was a little surprised. He stepped forward to take a closer look, and the bewilderment on his face became more and more apparent. He tried to push the spinning wheel, and suddenly, the spinning wheel pulled 20 spindles, and the 20 cotton threads made a hissing sound. Not only the middle-aged tailor was stunned, but the others who saw the scene were also completely stunned. Sandro saw the astonishment on their faces. He couldn't help but think of the shock he and his father had felt last night. He clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. "This is a new type of textile machine made by our family. From now on, you must follow the provisions of the contract. You must not leak the information about the textile machine." The tailors were startled. They understood why the requirements of the contract were so strange. "What if I want to go home?" one of the tailors whispered. Sandro said in a cold voice, "The contract is very clear. The duration of the contract is 6 months. After 6 months, you will naturally be allowed to go home." 6 months to go home? There was a commotion in the crowd. Sandro frowned and indifferently said, "If you perform well, then you will get the opportunity to write a letter to your family." The crowd gradually calmed down after hearing this. Although 6 months was a long time, but it was acceptable if they could write a letter. Moreover, the other party was a noble. They couldn't afford to provoke them. Next, under the arrangement of Sandro, all of them entered their respective textile machines and began to work. Cotton, thread, cloth, and other materials were consigned by carriages and sent to the factory. "Who is this?" A young tailor was puzzled as he saw Dudian, who was immersed in the textile machine. Sandro came over and scolded. "This is not something you should ask. Do your own work." Yes. The young tailor was scared and quickly bowed his head. After Sandro left, he secretly looked at Dudian. He found that the boy, who was a few years younger than him, was actually improving the textile machine. Other people also noticed this and were surprised. They didn't know where the Ryan family had hired this talented tailor. The day passed quickly. All the textile machines had been improved by Dudian. He left the textile factory and dragged his sick body back to the bed in the castle to recuperate. Old Feline came in with the middle-aged maid. The latter gently placed some food on the table beside the bed. After the middle-aged maid left, Dudeen immediately grabbed the food and started to eat. He didn't have time to eat as he had been improving the textile machines for the whole day and night. You are really working hard. Old Feline saw Dudeen gobbling up the food. Eat slowly. Is it enough? Dudeen vaguely said while chewing. Show me today's newspaper. Chapter 187. That's good. Dudeen took the newspaper and said, remember to keep an eye on the factory. Don't let them inquire about the new textile machines. The longer they hide it, the more we'll be able to find them. I will. Old Feline nodded. He had already transferred all attendants to patrol outside the factory after seeing the new textile machine. Even the knights who guarded the gate of the castle had changed from 4-people shifts to 2 people on a full-time basis. Dudeen opened the newspaper and saw the headline. Melon Consortium has invested a huge amount of money to build the Chamber of Commerce of Gold Antiques. In the future, the exchange rate between gold and silver coins is expected to increase. Below this news was the second news. Sterling Consortium has been underestimated. Cash flow problems may lead to the collapse of the industry chain. Dudeen slowly looked from top to bottom and suddenly asked, which news agency is this newspaper from? A news agency run by Melon Consortium. Old Feline guessed Dudeen's thoughts. The newspaper sales of this news agency is extremely high. It is one of the many industries under the Melon Consortium. It is second only to the Huasheng Consortium and the Military News Agency. Dudeen nodded. It was no wonder that most of the news was related to the Melon Consortium. Although not much was mentioned on the surface, but the hidden source of interest was leaning towards the Melon Consortium. Scott Consortium and other consortiums were using the method of suppression. The advantage of this was that the rich businessmen who were ready to join the Scott Consortium and other consortiums would have to take into account the benefits. Although the main circle of consortiums were aristocrats, but many wealthy businessmen in the commercial district were also the mainstay of the consortium. Many a little makes a mickle. The wealth created by the consortium was not inferior to some of the upper-class aristocrats. The New World Consortium doesn't have any aristocrats or wealthy businessmen to join. How long can it last with the support of the Ryan family? Dudeen glanced at the news at the bottom of the newspaper. The content was some professional economic analysis. It pointed out the disadvantages and weaknesses of the Ryan family. It was also difficult for them to develop. Dean roughly glanced at it. Not to mention other people, even he had to nod his head in agreement. It seems that in the eyes of Melon Consortium, their real enemy is the Scott Consortium and other consortiums. We're just a small role. They don't give us much space in the newspaper. Unless they are aristocrats or wealthy businessmen, most people simply ignore us. This is to prevent publicity for our consortium. Dudeen put down the newspaper and said. Old Feline sighed. Yes, if the target is too obvious, then our consortium will be reported in the headlines. Even if it is a negative report, it is equal to increasing our reputation. Melon Consortium's news agency has been established for many years. They know the essence of public opinion. Old Feline couldn't help but look at Dudeen. He was aware that the teenager's mind was extremely sharp. It was hard to imagine that he was just a child who grew up in an ordinary family. Dudeen asked, is there any deep hatred between the Scott Consortium and the Melon Consortium? They're old rivals, Old Feline said. The Scott Consortium started from the mining industry. Now the mining chain has spread over 3 regions and hundreds of small towns. A few years ago, the Melon Consortium wanted a piece of the pie. That's how the contradiction appeared. Dudeen nodded slightly. It was normal to see Old Feline's jealous eyes. Have a batch of alchemy goods been sold today? Dudeen asked. There was a touch of smile on Old Feline's face as he heard Dudeen's question. I have seen that thing. It is very practical and has a huge market potential. It should completely replace the fire scythe and become a necessity for every household. You have made more than 1,000 boxes, and more than 200 boxes have been sold today. It is estimated that it will ferment in a few days and the news will spread to the other nearby towns. At that time, the supply will be in short supply. Yes, Dudian nodded. There will be trouble when the time comes. The alchemists of other consortiums will buy it and analyze it. You should use all the funds in your hands to prepare the materials. Unfortunately, we don't have enough money. Otherwise, we could buy all the materials in the market. By the time the other consortiums produce the alchemy goods, our reputation will have spread. People will subconsciously pursue a sense of security. It will become a habit for them to buy things from the old shops. They won't be able to grab much business. Yes, it's a pity. Old Feline was also distressed. Although the price of this thing was cheap, but the sales volume was high. What a huge number it would be if every household used it. Moreover, it was a consumable. The value of the industry was almost comparable to the major industries of other consortiums. Unfortunately, their mouths were small. They couldn't eat this big cake. They could only eat as soon as possible before the big cake was snatched away by others. Our snowball has to roll. We should immediately invest the funds we have in it. Dudian saw the distressed look on old Feline's face, but there weren't too many waves in his heart. He had expected this early on. It was difficult to rise, but it was easy to fall. He didn't have the capital to monopolize the huge market of matches. But his original goal was not to monopolize the market. However, he wouldn't let others take advantage of him. He couldn't eat the apple. Even if he lost it, not everyone would be able to pick it up and eat it. Go back and contact the Scott Consortium. Tell them about our alchemy product. The name of this thing is match. It's best to cooperate with other consortiums before they know the value of the match. They will take the big share, while we will take the small share. Let the big consortiums fight with the other consortiums. As long as we roll the funds as soon as possible and rent the passage to the outside of the giant wall, no one will be able to shake our position in the future. Dudian leaned on the bed and said to Old Feline. Old Feline's eyes lit up. This is a good idea. The Scott Consortium should accept it. Since we can't eat it, then we will suffer losses. It's better to maximize the benefits. Speaking up to here, he couldn't help but look at the youth with snow-white skin. At first, he thought that he was a meticulous jailbreaker. Later, he thought that he was a cold-blooded and cruel hunter. Until yesterday, he thought that he was a natural tailor. But now, he discovered that he was clearly a treacherous black merchant. You are so young, but your heart is darker than mine. Old Feline sighed. He suddenly thought of something. There is a military newspaper. They reported some information about criminals and wanted information. There's also information about the magistrate. It has the latest investigation about the assassination of Deacon Huey. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.